his laugh, cigarettes curling, smoking his political trap. Michael Vaz roars through the screen, he flies, painting red and blue skies with his fiery cry. He's the world's watchdog, calling out the bluff. Right-wing swagger, but his heart's pretty tough. He's a Republican dragon with his truthful slight, fights the battles unseen in the shadows of the night. From policy to passion, he breaks it all down, giving a voice to the voiceless, wearing his crown. Caffeine-fueled mornings, the smoke curls dance, puppy at his feet, giving life one more chance. Through algorithms and bias, he cuts straight and clear. Michael's roar echoes in the hemisphere. Michael Vaz roars through the screen, he flies, painting red and blue skies with his fiery cry. He's the world's watchdog, calling out the bluff. Right-wing swagger, but his heart's pretty tough. No sound bites allowed is his ultimate creed. A dragon's perspective where facts are the seed. Standing tall on his battlefield of thoughts, guarding the truth that others forgot. Michael Vaz roars through the screen, he flies, painting red and blue skies with his fiery cry. He's the world's watchdog, calling out the bluff. Right-wing swagger, but his heart's pretty tough.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is No Sound Bites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss. Here in the Bronx, New York, today is January 3rd. Yes, just the third day of 2026. We have breaking news, a reaction to events that happened overnight that has shocked most of the world, I think, and many Americans as well. There's been a press conference by President Trump with Secretary of State Marco Rubio talking about Venezuela and what the United States has just done. And people are trying to figure out how they feel about this. Is this good news? Is it bad news? What will this mean for the future? Well, we're going to try and talk about a few of those things and some of the things that President Trump mentioned in his speech to the nation, some of the questions that he answered, and where we stand at this moment. And of course, because we're going to be talking about all of these issues, I want to make sure that you are both well informed, and I want to hear what you have to say. And we have an international audience. So those of our audience who are in Switzerland, who are over in Italy, in the United Kingdom, over in Japan and Thailand, all across the world, I want to hear what you have to say about this. Not just what I hope all the Americans that are going to see this will also comment from coast to coast. Now, normally we do a Sunday show, and I will tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That is our Sunday live stream. We will be entering into year 9. That's season 8, but it's year 9 of doing our Sunday live stream. And that's going to go on like usual. But this is breaking news, and I thought it was important enough to not wait an extra day to get some of the initial reactions out there. So I'm counting on you guys to tell me what you're thinking. And I know we already have one comment before we even start that comes from Dow. Dow says, well, they did it. Sounds like President Donald Trump wants to take my advice and own Venezuela. Now, that's a good point, Dow. And for those who are not familiar with the program, haven't heard me talk about this before, I have a very strict rule, and this came up from the Iraq War. And I made it very clear that the United States should never have troops on the ground anywhere in the world fighting in any conflict unless we own the land that our soldiers fight over, the land that our soldiers potentially bleed and die over. And so, as I said about Iraq and Afghanistan, I'm saying about Venezuela and any other conflict you can name, that if the United States is actively fighting, then we should own whatever we are fighting over. And if it is not worth fighting over, of owning, then it is not worth fighting over for the United States directly having U.S. troops involved. That's just a rule I have, and I believe that's the definition of every conflict. If we're going to be involved, then we should own it. If we're not willing to own it, we should not be involved, not militarily. So, yes, to an extent, President Trump has adopted that same ideology, but not exactly. And there are some problems with that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Thank you for bringing it up, Dow. I will be happy to talk about that. And by the way, folks, throughout the entire show, as always, if you disagree, that's fine. I want to hear your voice. If you agree, I want to hear your voice. I want to hear what you think, because this is a conversation. It's not just me talking to you and you just listening. It's not a lecture. This is a conversation, even though it's digital. So let me start off. We know the breaking news. Last night at about almost 11 o'clock at night, 10:45, President Trump authorized our military to go into Venezuela under an operation to capture Nicolas Maduro and his wife, who happened to be the president of Venezuela. Now, very clear about this. The international opinion, we're talking about Europe, England, the United States, most nations in the world, except for China, Iran, and possibly Russia, other than those three nations, just about every nation in the world dispute and do not recognize Maduro as the president of Venezuela. They consider him to be an authoritarian dictator in Venezuela who came to power under socialism and destroyed that nation, destroyed its capabilities. When Maduro took over, he also he nationalized all of the industries as part of his socialist ideology. And this is something that we saw previously under Hugo Chavez, who preceded Maduro. And that was that every business, and in particular for the United States, all of the oil industry, all of the infrastructure that we built would be taken over, even though it was private property of businesses, that the government of Venezuela would take all of that as if it were its own property, as if Venezuela built it, not individual private businesses, and they would run it, which they ran it into the ground. They failed to be able to keep it up to date and viable, and thus the nation, Venezuela, which at one point 2 decades ago was one of the most prosperous nations in the world, and in particular, the most prosperous nation in South America, fell into such disrepute that in 2018, it was the leading source. They had a 1,000% increase in measles, mumps, and rubella that spread throughout all of South America and into Central America. And because of the caravans and the Venezuelans racing out of Venezuela, running to any other nation, those refugees and those illegal aliens brought into caravans entering into the United States, especially under the Biden-Harris administration, they brought measles, mumps, and rubella into the United States because they weren't fully immunized, because the healthcare in Venezuela had completely collapsed. I'm not blaming those illegal aliens, because they couldn't get healthcare, not in Venezuela. And they went into caravans, traveling 1,000 miles, spreading that disease. And that is the leading cause of why mumps and measles has increased in the United States. It's because of the illegal aliens that brought it to our nation, not because of people not getting vaccinated. We had already 99% eliminated measles and mumps in the United States and also in Mexico. That wasn't, not being vaccinated was not the problem. It was that people were coming into our nation who were also not vaccinated. Now, that's only one aspect of the collapse of Venezuela. There's also the fact that the people were starving, as we saw many, many articles talking about how the people of Venezuela were breaking into zoos and slaughtering the zoo animals so that they could have food to eat. And they were literally eating out of dumpsters. People have been starving for years, almost a decade in Venezuela. The people had no right to self-defense. There were paramilitary gangs, death squads that were going throughout all of Venezuela and killing the people. We know that according to the New York Times, 2019, that over 5,000 people at that time had been killed by the Maduro Venezuelan government to silence them forever. And this, of course, led to Maria Machado. She won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2025 for trying to overthrow the Venezuelan government. Well, that happened. And Maria Machado, the Nobel Prize winner for 2025, has been praising step by step all of the actions by the Trump administration in the Caribbean in destroying international drug cartel boats that were shipping in illegal drugs into America. 30 times we've destroyed those boats, as well as stopping 2 oil tankers, I believe 3 oil tankers to be exact, that were bringing oil illegally through Iran, through Venezuela, and bringing it to other nations, including Cuba, which is a violation of international sanctions. And the United States took over these boats, many of them flying without international flags. Therefore, they were pirate ships. For those who don't know, if you don't have a flag of a nation on your ship, if you're not registered, then that ship is considered a pirate ship and can be sank or seized in international waters. That's just a fact of maritime law. So there's been a lot happening. And of course, the United States amassed about 15,000 troops, well over 150 planes and bombers, aircraft carrier group, and stationed them, which is often in the Caribbean, but we stationed them just off of Venezuela's coast to enforce the reduction of drug cartels, shipping drugs illegal into America, to reduce the amount of slavery, human trafficking that the Tren de Aragua cartel is known for having. That's one of their primary things that they did, is bring slaves into Mexico and into the United States. So we were stemming that. So there's a lot in the background that we need to remember and understand about how we got to where we were last night and early this morning. These were the things that brought us to that moment. We need to understand that context of the history of that region, of that nation, and the interactions with the United States. Are many grievances with them, both in violations of sanctions, in violations of private property of American citizens, the burden that was added to the United States in terms of illegal immigrants and human trafficking, as well as drugs. Not so much the fentanyl, which has been a major statement by the left-leaning news media saying, well, Trump's doing this because of fentanyl, but fentanyl comes from China. No, Trump has been saying it's about drugs, hard drugs, whether it be cocaine or heroin or fentanyl. Doesn't matter how much. All of that is something that is both illegal and a detriment to the United States. So there's been a lot of spin on what's been happening. Now, before I go further, and I know there are a couple of comments, I'm going to get to them in one moment, I need to also mention that in the last several, I've done some interviews with the Matthew J. Show back on December 30th. I've been on The Opinion Guy with Charles Garia on Mondays, and I've spoken with him and his and his audience, as well as my own, about Venezuela. And I've said repeatedly for a couple of weeks now that I did not expect the United States to invade Venezuela unless the Venezuelan military was stupid and actually attacked the American troops. Then we would have justification for going in without any question. No nation would ever question us. I did not think we would unilaterally and proactively go into Venezuela and take that nation over. To an extent, I was right. To an extent, I was wrong. And so I will admit that, as I always do on this program, if I have misunderstood something, if I was incorrect in a prediction, I will always tell you that because I'm always honest with you. I'm telling you what I see. So on that side, I was wrong. Because obviously, yesterday, nobody knew this. Donald Trump went in. He gave the word, and we saw our military take action. Now, some of the Democrats today are upset because Congress was not notified ahead of time. And some and many Democrats right now are trying to say, well, remember, this is completely illegal. Trump could not declare war, and therefore this is an entirely illegal action. We have seen Democrats, even libertarians, the former libertarian presidential candidate, Chase Oliver, has come out on X or Twitter and stated that this was illegal and that Donald Trump needs to be impeached. I will explain during the show that's wrong. Donald Trump most likely cannot be impeached over this. There is a stipulation, there is a condition where he could, but overwhelmingly, he cannot. And I know some with TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, some people who just don't like Donald Trump, they're going to say, oh my God, that's so horrible. No, he must be. No, he didn't break the law, except for one condition. One condition where you could claim Donald Trump did something illegal. But in every other scenario, he did not. And I will explain that so we can have a clear understanding of what we're dealing with. So I wanted to bring us all up to date on this to understand the background so we can understand what's happening this moment so that we can understand what's going to happen in the future because they're all connected. I think that's correct. So, and I know I have some comments here. I'm going to go back and forth in the comments. Let me see if there's anything I need to address immediately. And we have Dow. Dow mentions that Venezuelans are celebrating. Wonder how fast the gravity of cleaning up the mess and what happens afterward occurs. That's actually where we're going to be starting the program. That's where I'm going to start some of the coverage that's happened in the last, 12 hours? Gracie is there with us, and she says, I'm sorry, this is all for naught. They sent them to SDNY, and Pam Bondi is involved. They will get away with everything and will be released. These guys sacrificed their lives for nothing to happen. Well, let me clarify, as has been stated by Donald Trump, the Gerald Rainey, and also the Secretary of State Marco Rubio. No Americans died. None. No American vehicles. There was a helicopter that was struck in the events last night. It was not downed. That vehicle, that helicopter, was damaged but returned to the aircraft carrier. It was not lost. No lives were lost. A couple of Americans were injured, I believe mostly from that helicopter being struck, but otherwise no life was lost on the American side. And minimal casualties at this moment are apparent in Venezuela itself. Mostly just the guards surrounding Maduro appear to be the only significant casualties. Some of the military structures were the significant casualties. That's about it. Civilians, by and large, were not touched, as we understand at this moment. But I know Pam Bondi, I'm going to get into what she said. I have some problems with that. We will get to that. Thank you for bringing that up. Let's see. Gracie goes on to say, this is sad for Venezuela. Actually, I think it's the exact opposite. I think this is good news for Venezuela and South America, even Central America. I think this is bad news for the drug cartels. And I know that there was an implied threat from Marco Rubio towards Cuba, which I think is more a threat than a future action. But Again, there's a lot to go over. I will try and address that. But I think this is good news for Venezuela, and I will discuss that. Catching up. Dow says, I'm certain this move on Venezuela was a signal to Putin, Xi, Scheinbaum, Canada's Prime Minister, the Ayatollah, that the Trump administration will smite those who refuse to deal with America in good faith. We will address that. There is an aspect of that this was a statement to the world. And this is on top of several other actions Trump has done. In particular, one of the most important moments of 2025 was when the United States struck Iran. It was a statement to the world as well as to all of the terrorist organizations. This was another statement to the world about whether or not America would take action. How strong is Donald Trump as the leader of America and therefore the world de facto? And I think he's made a very strong statement. We'll get into that. Dowse also says, in my opinion, Chase Oliver is that mythical unicorn, the progressive libertarian. He is a progressive libertarian. That is true. And I've met Chase Oliver. I've spoken to him in person during the campaign, the 2024 campaign for the president. In fact, I tried to get an interview with him. Wasn't able to get that, but I spoke to his vice presidential candidate, Mike Termott, instead. But I've met Chase several times. I don't think he's a bad person. I think he has very good intentions. I think his policies are absolutely progressive and counterproductive. But that's my opinion of his policies. As an individual, Chase is a nice guy. I have nothing bad to say about Chase Oliver as a human being. In terms of his policies, incredibly misguided, absolutely woke, and I disagree with his policies. But this is why he lost very, very badly in 2024. Gracie says, and then I'm going to get further into the show. Gracie says, no, if the SDNY screws up or Bondi does, it's sad for Venezuela. Oh, I understand. If on the American side, the prosecution and the further actions on Maduro, if they're screwed up, then that will be bad. I understand, Gracie, and I can agree with that. Okay. So, and Gracie brings up a very important part that I should bring up. Nicolas Maduro, the former president of Venezuela, the authoritarian leader of Venezuela, has been captured by the United States, is in transit and or has actually landed upon U.S. soil. He is in the process of being brought to New York State because New York State has an indictment. He's being arrested effectively for charges that were brought in 2020 in New York State. Charges were brought against Maduro, and he is being charged and he will be tried based on those charges in New York State. So this wasn't just Donald Trump going in regime change. I'm just going to go in and take everything and walk away. No. There is legitimacy to what Donald Trump did to an extent, depending on how you look at this. Part of that is Maduro was charged. He evaded prosecution of U.S. law, and Donald Trump enforced U.S. law, bringing this man to justice to face the charges in New York State, and therefore he may be punished for that. Very much like what we saw in 1989. And I think this is a good point to step into what we're seeing here. So let me start off, because much of the news media has framed this as if it is something absolutely negative, that the Venezuelan people are absolutely suffering and that they're angry, that they disagree with what Donald Trump has said. We are seeing a lot of people on the left try to frame that messaging. That is not what we are seeing actually as a result. Not all of the American news media, ABC, CBS, CNN, they're not portraying what is actually happening. Now, as best as we can tell at this moment, those individuals who are Venezuelan and benefited directly from the authoritarian rule of Maduro, they're upset. They're having a bad day. The majority of Venezuelans in Venezuela and those who are refugees in other countries are absolutely ecstatic. They are happy, very much like Maria Machado, the Nobel Peace Prize winner. They are ecstatic that Maduro has been deposed and he will no longer be in charge. So, and we see this is from the AP, Associated Press. And these are photos not just in America, but in other locations as well. And as we can see, these are Venezuelans who are celebrating what Donald Trump has done. This first image is here in the United States. This is in Lima, Peru, where some Venezuelans and the Venezuelan people spread throughout South America, throughout Central America, in Mexico, and in the United States in the years that they have been trying to escape from the dictatorship of Maduro and socialism. So this is from Lima, Peru, where they were celebrating Donald Trump. This is an image, and I want you to notice the AP immediately goes from the celebration, the large number of Venezuelans that are happy about this, to show us an image that emotionally manipulates you to make you think Orange Man bad. And they're showing us images of a woman who is running, a man who is running, but not everyone is running. That this was during the action to take Maduro. And there were some bombs that were dropped on military installations and government installations. Obviously, people who are out at night at 11, 12 at night were scared to death, because who wouldn't be? Bombs are dropping in the sky, planes are overhead. You don't know what's happening. It's the middle of the night. Power has been removed from parts of the city, and you don't know what's happening. Of course, people would be running, but that doesn't mean that they are upset at what is the result or why this happened. This is in the moment. Again, this is in the moment as the United States was going forward, and we can see that there's a structure, I believe that is a military structure, that was hit at the airport, which would limit the ability of planes of the Venezuelan Air Force to attack the United States planes and helicopters. So obviously we would try to suppress the airport. So that's just the airport. Again, this wasn't totally decimated. It was just disabled. We can see there's a helicopter here that's, it looks like a military helicopter, and it is not being prepped to take off. It has been completely suppressed, which is what the U.S. military wanted to do. But the airport itself was not destroyed. It was not devastated, at least from this image from the AP. There are people, again, those who were benefiting from the Maduro government were upset. And we have this image of individuals, and this is in Caracas, the capital of Venezuela. And we do see some individuals that are upset that Maduro is no longer there. If you notice, that's basically a handful of individuals. This isn't a crowd of tens of thousands. This was not a regime that was loved. But every regime has some amount of supporters, otherwise they wouldn't exist. The people would have overthrown them immediately. Here, this is another facility, a dock, and as we can see amongst a couple of these docks, there was a building that was struck that distracted a lot of military personnel, allowing the U.S. forces to get in and get out. But if you notice, we didn't destroy the entire dock. The pier is not gone. The other dock facilities still exist. Ships exist. We did not destroy the nation. We did not destroy the nation's infrastructure. This wasn't an invasion in that sense. This isn't like D-Day or Normandy. There was very limited damage. As you can see, even the buildings surrounding this were not damaged. This is another image of individuals who were concerned during the time that the U.S. was conducting the operation. So confused, they're concerned. These are family members that lived near where Maduro lived, in that same neighborhood. And therefore, you would expect they would be very concerned because all of the military activity in their immediate neighborhood, they would be somewhat scared. Anyone would be with a family. So that explains that. But as you can see, they don't seem to be in danger. And here are some of the celebrations. This is one of them. And notice there are conservatively 100, maybe hundreds of individuals in this one image alone, taken early this morning on Saturday, January 3rd, of those celebrating the United States deposing the authoritarian socialist in Venezuela. This happened actually, I stand corrected again. This is an image from Chile, Santiago, Chile. I know, you saw the flag and I forgot the order of the images and I thought, oh yeah, this was in America. No, this is in Chile. This is in South America. And these are Venezuelans who had to escape to Chile, and they are happy that the United States, that Donald Trump has done what he has done, freed their nation, essentially. And they are celebrating in the hundreds, apparently. This is an image of, obviously, the government has not collapsed in the sense that while the leadership is changing, there is going to be a regime change, there is not complete and absolute chaos in the aftermath. The military does have control, and they're actually rather relaxed. I mean, look at this guy. They're rather relaxed, which means they don't feel an imminent threat on their individual lives, whether from the people nor from the American government. The threat is basically over. The United States basically has done what it wanted to do. There's no need to continue to fight. And so they're very, considering all the circumstances, they're pretty relaxed. This woman, and I am sure you will see this image a lot from the Associated Press, and they're going to show this woman, and you're going to see this from most of the leftist, left-leaning news sites. They're going to use this image to try and demonize Donald Trump, the Trump administration, and say, see the anguish of the people. This is a Maduro supporter. According to the AP, this is a woman who was participating in a rally to support the authoritarian dictator, Nicolas Maduro. She is a Maduro supporter. So obviously she is in anguish because the dictator that she supported, that she benefited from, ideally, or presumably, he's been removed and the government's going to change. And whatever benefit she was getting from the Maduro regime, she will no longer get. The new regime will come in. All of the benefits she previously was receiving will be removed. It's kind of like the Vichy French. So that is important to understand. So again, we put it in context. Here is yet another image. And notice the AP is trying to overwhelm you with images showing people who seem to be upset. Each and every one of the ones that are upset are Maduro supporters, and they are in the handful. But when we see images in many countries that Venezuelans had to escape to survive the Maduro regime, you see them in the hundreds, and you see them absolutely jubilant. This is, in this image, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 individuals, presumably. I'm assuming they're all together. 2 of them are armed. And of these 7 people, these are all Maduro supporters. And now, mind you, they aren't going out trying to fight the American forces. They're not fighting the government. They're not involved in fighting anyone at this moment, but they are upset. They are Maduro supporters. They were benefiting to some degree under the Maduro regime, as opposed to the thousands, if not the tens of thousands and millions of Venezuelans that had to escape the country to survive. And this is an image, and this is in Madrid, Spain. Some of the Venezuelans went to Spain. And you can see in this image, dozens, presumably, based on the angle and the way it's being shown, I would estimate dozens, if not 100, maybe even hundreds of individuals in Madrid, Spain, celebrating the freedom of Venezuela. And I believe this is the last image. Nope, it's not. There are people in Mexico who don't like Donald Trump. They're supporting Maduro, and they're saying Donald Trump is a bad guy. And again, we see a handful of individuals as opposed to the images celebrating, which are apparently in the hundreds, if not thousands. And we see maybe a dozen people who are in support of Maduro. This is the current status in Venezuela. People are waiting for a store to open up. This is in Caracas as well, and the capital, where we saw the bombs drop and where the U.S. troops went into. And as you can see, these people are not injured. They're not. This isn't Gaza. This isn't like many of the conflicts we have seen around the world. They're pretty calm. Yes, they're waiting for a store to open up. Yes, they are nervous. Yes, they are concerned. They're not injured. They're not panicking. They're not apparently displeased. They're waiting to be able to, obviously, they're going to stock up on whatever supplies they can. They're unsure of the future. I give you that. But this isn't panicking. They're not trying to swamp or break into the store to just raid all the food and take everything that's there. They're not in a panic. That tells you something about the mental state of the people in Venezuela about what happened. They're not that upset. They're not displeased. They're concerned about their future, but they're not panicking. This isn't being seen as a massive world-changing negative. And this is an image from Ecuador. And a woman in Ecuador who is celebrating Donald Trump and what he did for Venezuela. This is in Ecuador. So we're seeing a lot in South America. Someone who's following the news and listening to this is actually a pretty up to date. This was while Donald Trump was speaking. The news was being broadcast across Venezuela and many, many nations in South America. In fact, this is in Argentina that the news is being broadcast. And of course, people are concerned and paying attention, but not panicking. Here is another image of Venezuelan supporters of Maduro. We have 5 of them. 6, 7, 8. I stand corrected. 8. With a couple of bikes, all armed with guns, which, by the way, the general public are not allowed to have. Maduro removed the right and the ability of the common citizenry to have firearms, which means that these individuals are paramilitary. This is something that's not explained often by the mainstream news media. These individuals are directly linked to the Maduro regime. They are paramilitary, if not secret police or military themselves. I would say probably paramilitary, based on this individual having a regular rifle, as opposed to this individual seems to have an AR-15. This one seems to have an AK-47, one of the models. And this one has a flak jacket, apparently. So they have military arms. 3 out of the 4 individuals that we can see clearly, 3 of them have military arms and armament, and 1 individual that just has civilian armament. I believe that these individuals are all paramilitary supporters of Maduro. Quite possibly, they could be part of the death squads, who are the only individuals besides the military that were allowed to have firearms in Venezuela. The news media isn't making that clear, but this is the context that you need to understand. Here is another supporter, this one who is happy with Donald Trump and his action. This is in Cuba. No, excuse me, correction. This is outside the Versailles Cuban cuisine. This is in Miami. And this woman is in Miami. And she's obviously a Trump supporter. Many Cubans are very fervent Republican, conservative, and at the moment, Donald Trump supporters. And this is yet another image of that. This is from the speech earlier today. So I wanted to give you, this is in images, what we can understand about the mood of South America. Overwhelmingly, an image after image after image, if not showing the exact moment of the operation by the United States in Caracas, in Venezuela, every other image is showing us people who are joyful in the hundreds and a handful of questionable individuals who are armed in many cases that we saw that are supporters of Maduro, that were benefiting from his dictatorship. And those images are showing far, far fewer numbers. That gives us a very good impression of what is being felt out there. So I thought that was important to bring up. Now, obviously, a lot of people are already having feelings about this, and we see this is from my good friend Andy Hoosier, who has a syndicated radio program. I do invite you to check him out. He's on Facebook, and he has this meme, which you can see, Obama, let's negotiate. Terrorist says, I want to blow stuff up. Biden says, let's negotiate. The terrorist says they want to blow stuff up. Donald Trump says, I want to blow stuff up. The terrorist says, I want to negotiate. It's just a statement about the different approach and the difference between, excuse me, weak presidents and strong presidents. And we are seeing that impact between what happened with Iran and what's happening with Venezuela. The world is having it's a stabilizing effect on the world. There are fewer rogue conflicts happening in the world. There is less terrorism happening at this moment around the world. The Houthis have calmed down. Hezbollah is not as active. Hamas is virtually inactive. ISIS, other than a couple of isolated events in Syria and a couple of locations like in the Sudan, other than that, they have calmed down. Terrorism is decreasing. Its activity is decreasing in the world. Even drug cartels are slowing down their activity. There is less human trafficking happening at this moment in the world. There is more stability because we have a strong president who is taking action that is definitive, and the rogue agents in the world are less inclined to take action. They're more afraid that they will get retaliated against. That being said, Donald Trump said something, and he coined a term. He called it the Donroe Doctrine. The Donroe Doctrine. And that was a play or a change to the Monroe Doctrine that was created in 1823. And it's very much like the manifest destiny of the United States. The Monroe Doctrine was created by Teddy Roosevelt, to keep, actually, it was President Monroe, and then again by Teddy Roosevelt, saying that Europe does not have the right to colonize and to control through puppet governments South America and Central America. Now, at the same time, it also did say that the United States would have a oversized impact on Central America and South America. But foreign countries from the other side of the world, if you weren't part of the North American continent or the South American continent, that you would not, other nations would not have as much impact on the way those governments, those nations existed. Although the United States would have a lot of impact on South America and Central America, obviously. So you can say there's some people who are very angry about the Monroe Doctrine. There are some who are very happy about it, some who are mixed. It has its benefits and its downsides. And for everything that was good, there was something that was bad. It's a mixed bag. But its thought process was more about independence for South America and Central America, as opposed to what we saw in Africa in the 1800s, in the early 1900s. It enabled South America and Central America to have more independence in their governance and the way their nations grew than if we had more European or even Southeast Asian influence on those nations. Donald Trump is using his actions today on Venezuela. He is justifying it in part based on the Monroe Doctrine from 1823, as used by Teddy Roosevelt, and one of the most recent executions of the Monroe Doctrine was the Cuban Missile Crisis. It was John F. Kennedy. JFK was using the Monroe Doctrine to justify preventing Russia from bringing nuclear missiles into Cuba. And that's part of the reason why he was justified in doing it. Besides the fact it was national security, but it was also the Monroe Doctrine. Other nations cannot come into the Americas and have outsized influence, especially when that influence is detrimental to the United States. They can be independent nations, but they can't be puppets of other nations or limited in their puppetry amongst other nations, especially from other parts of the world. So the Monroe Doctrine is something that has been in place for over 100 years now, and it is still active. It is still vital to national security for the United States, and it is part of the justification of what Donald Trump did today. Whether you like it or not, that's the history, and there is precedent. We've done this before. For 100 years, we have done this, and it's been in recent history, that being JFK, that is an ancient history. And so this is something that has been consistent. So let me stop there for a second. In part, I want to take a drink. Give me a second, clear my throat. You're funny, Joel. I just saw this comment real quick. Joel goes, that meme, the meme from Andy Hoosier says, he gives him a Fifth Element vibe. Does anyone want to negotiate? I saw the Fifth Element. I think it's a great film. Underrated, massively underrated. Real fun film. And yeah, so I get the line. It is very much like that. So thank you for that. All right. Let me catch up on some of the comments here. Because as I said, this is a conversation with you guys and me. So I wanted to make sure we understood the nature of how we got to this moment and what is the international reaction. What are Venezuelans thinking about this across the world? And overwhelmingly, at least based on the evidence we can see at this moment, Venezuelans are happy. The Venezuelan people see this as a positive, at least potentially positive outcome, that this is good for them overwhelmingly. And for those who aren't obviously happy, they're at least cautious. We're not seeing that the nation is angry. We're not seeing that the nation is overwhelmingly pissed off at the United States. That's not the case. Although the left will try and make it seem that way, that's not how South America is reacting to this. This isn't how the Venezuelans are reacting to this. They're taking this as positive. And we have justification. This isn't something that Trump just decided to do. They'd love to say that Trump is just making stuff up. He's just creating power for himself that has never been wielded by an American president, American government at any time in the past. And that is patently not true. We see precedent after precedent, and very often the president will cite exact laws as well as precedent to show this is why he has the power to do it. You may not like the way he has interpreted or used precedent and law to justify what he has done, but they are precedent and law. He isn't just making this up. He isn't just winging it. This isn't someone who is just being authoritarian because he wants to have the power. These are laws that were created by Democrats and Republicans over decades, and in some cases, hundreds of years, that have been created, that are on the books, that no one has ever removed. No one has tried to stop this. So, and I will get into the war powers discussion in just a moment, but these are things that Democrats were perfectly fine existing. These were the powers of the president and have been for over 100 years. And now they're saying, well, Donald Trump's just being authoritarian. He's just doing things that are crazy. No more crazy than JFK. No more crazy than Teddy Roosevelt. This is something that America has historically done. Whether you like it or not, that's a different question. You may not like it, but that's not the same thing as to say it's out of the blue. Let me go to the comments. So, Dow says, no Americans died, but what Grace means is that our intel, soldiers, and others involved were placed in harm's way with the risk of Bondi bungling the case. Maduro will be released, and Venezuelans, he goes on to say, will have to deal with Maduro's faction trying to retake the country and levers of power. I don't think Maduro's faction, based on the images and some of the, I've been looking at TikTok and some of the news media, both before and after President Trump's speech, I have the impression Maduro's done. His faction is done. That they were holding on by the sheer willpower of Maduro and his control of the military. And at this point, he's lost the military. The military does not want to fight America. And they really aren't for the most part. And the people never were behind him. The faction is done. The socialists will not be able to continue to control Venezuela going forward. That's just not going to happen. So I don't think that will happen. But there are other complications, other problems that could happen with Pam Bondi, which I will get to in just a moment. Because we are deep diving this, folks. Please share this with your friends. Let's have this conversation. Joel is with us, and Joel says, in our country, we've had a lot of people who claim Trump is a criminal, a tyrant, needs to be taken out. What if China came in and liberated us and saved the country from Trump? How is this different? That's one of the arguments being made right now. If Donald Trump could do this, then doesn't Russia have the right to go into the Ukraine? Doesn't China have the right to go into Taiwan? There's a way of seeing it. You could make that argument. You can. There is a difference here. And part of that difference is the United States didn't starve the Venezuelan people. We didn't kill the Venezuelan people. We haven't been doing that for years. We didn't start a war with the people. We were going after the government. Now, you take a look at Russia, Ukraine. Russia was going after the people. Russia has been killing the Ukrainian people. Russia invaded, and they have their claims. And from the point of view of Putin, he's got his legitimate reasons, he says, okay. But he attacked the people, not the government. He came in, when he invaded, He took the land and killed the people on that land, enforcing it by power. That's very different than what Trump just did. Same thing with China. China's saying that they are going to take Taiwan by force, that they are going to go in and they are going to overwhelm the defenses of Taiwan and force the people to become part of China. That's not what Trump has done. Donald Trump hasn't forced the Venezuelans to do anything. He hasn't gone in and killed Venezuelan people. He didn't send in thousands or hundreds of troops to overwhelm and take over the land itself. We took out the government. We took out someone who is internationally recognized as being an authoritarian and illegitimate leader. That's very important. He's illegitimate and who has negatively been impacting his own people for decades. They have been suffering. So there are differences between the two. And if Russia decided to, or China decided to come into the United States because we have to save the United States from Trump, well, has the government of the United States collapsed? No. Does the opposition of Donald Trump and Republicans, do they have power in the United States? Yes, they do. Do they have the ability to change things like in the midterm elections? They do. Do the American people have arms and the capability to fight the government if they chose to, if they believe that Donald Trump is a dictator and they can't follow him anymore? Yes, they do. We still have the rule of law that exists with the laws created by the left, by Democrats, by progressives. They're on the books, they exist, and no one has stopped them. Mandami, a straight up socialist, was just elected into New York City, and he took office. Donald Trump didn't stop him. The federal government didn't stop it. No one has kicked him out. He was elected, duly elected. He won his election. He took office. No one is stopping him. So you can't make the same argument about these other nations as opposed to what the very unique situation is in Venezuela. It's not the same. The left wants you to feel the same about it, but once you actually look at the details, it's not the same. So I think that, I don't know if that's the best answer to that, but I want to make sure I'm trying to convey it to you as quickly, and I know I'm gregarious, but relatively quickly, I'm trying to summarize the difference there for you. Thank you for the question. Let me see if I can catch up with some of the comments here. Dow says, it comes down to the willingness of foreign powers to flex militarily and the people's willingness to tolerate it. If the CCP tried something similar here, the Chinese Communist Party would probably be resisted at the level of the general population. Yes, because the American people still have the right and the power and the ability to resist the government if they chose to, if they felt that it was wrong. That's just a fact. So that is a critical difference. Let me see. So there's a little bit of conversation back and forth. I'm glad. Please do. I do encourage people in the chat to talk amongst themselves, but also ask me questions whenever you want to. I'm happy. Joel says, I'm glad Mike is covering this. All I have seen is Chuck Schumer social media posts being outraged. Again, this is what the left is. The left doesn't want you to understand this. They don't want you to understand the context of this. They don't want to take the time to actually have a conversation with you. And you may not agree with me, but at least you'll understand the full context and the consequences, good and bad, so that you can make up your own mind. And I will include the links of everything I am showing you after we are done so that you can look up more information that the mainstream media may not be emphasizing for you, like the images that we saw from the Associated Press, which is not a right-leaning source. And understanding the context of the images, as I just broke down for you guys, so that we can understand what is actually happening, not the left spin, what is actually happening across the world and the Venezuelan people. Let's understand this. And that gives us a greater context on what is happening and what Donald Trump has done and what are the likely consequences of this. Not that it's perfect, but it gives us an understanding. Let's see. We got a comment here. Dow says, so is the Johnson Doctrine of the 60s from Lyndon B. Johnson. So is, okay, the Monroe Doctrine, very much like the Johnson Doctrine. Many presidents have doctrines. These are grand ideas and visions for America, the way that we would govern, the way we interact in foreign policy. But the Monroe Doctrine is probably one of the most famous, and it has been referred to and has been used as a precedent several times for major events that affected the rest of the world as well as the United States. Most notably and most recently being with with Canada, Cuba and JFK. But that also includes what happened in Panama in 1989, which I will discuss with you, which is very much what we saw happen today. And this is a reason and an understanding why Donald Trump will not be impeached and should not be impeached. And that's 1989 in Panama with Manuel Noriega. And I'll get to that in just a moment. Let's see. Dow says, Milei in Argentina was ecstatic in his support of deposing Maduro. Milei is a good bellwether for liberty, in my opinion. For those who don't know, Milei, the president of Argentina, is a hardline libertarian. That does not mean he's not a Republican. He's definitely not a socialist. He's not a leftist. He's not a Democrat. He is a libertarian. And he very much goes by those principles in his approach to govern and reform Argentina. And in terms of the economics, he has done a phenomenal job. Now, you may say 20% inflation on a monthly basis is insane. Argentina, before Milei, was experiencing 2,000% of inflation on a monthly basis. He has done dramatic and astounding changes to Argentina to make it more solvent and more livable and increase the quality of life. He's not perfect, not by a long shot, but he is a very good bellwether of understanding what people in South America and many of the countries, what they are willing to do, that they have been so stepped upon by their leaders, by various socialist or governments, which have been rampant throughout repeatedly throughout the last roughly 7,500 years. Socialist governments keep popping up, promising everything, and absolutely being despicable authoritarians, killing their own people. And the public rises up. And they have been going through this process of trying to get democracy, and then there's a coup. They get into a socialist government, and it's authoritarian. They rise up again, and they start the process all over again. In Argentina, they went and said, you know what? How about we do something completely different, break the pattern, and go with the libertarian? And if he's wrong, well, we'll just have another coup. We'll depose him. We'll get another socialist authoritarian, and we'll eventually depose him too and go through the pattern all over again. They had nothing to lose, and they have been winning. Milei is a supporter of Donald Trump. They agree on many principles. That is also a good indication. Oh, I did answer Joel's question. Thank you. I'm glad. If I don't answer a question clearly, let me know, folks. I will try my best. Okay, so we've discussed a little bit about the Monroe, and that brings me to 1989. These things are important, folks. There's a reason why CNN and ABC They're not taking the time to talk to you about this. This is important information. They want you to forget because it makes it easy to say Orange Man bad, MAGA is evil, Republicans are horrible, or Nazis. They want to be able to say that. And if you remember the past, if you remember history, recent history, in my lifetime, if you remember these details, you don't believe what they're saying because it's not true. And you can point to the things. And one of the things they're trying to say right now is, well, Donald Trump, he has exceeded his power as president. Oops, there we go. Excuse me. There we go. That Donald Trump has exceeded his power as president, that he has usurped, he's an authoritarian and he's usurping governments and he's a colonizer. That's odd because in 1989, under George Bush, they didn't say the same thing. They said that they did say George Bush was being bad and it was horrible for America to do this, but he wasn't called the colonizer. And no one assumed that the United States was taking over Panama. Panama did not become the 51st state of the United States. They didn't become a commonwealth of the United States. They got to run their own country. They got to elect their own leaders. And while Panama is somewhat corrupt, which is not unusual for South America, Central America, they're their own country. And they have their own leadership. And they lead their nation essentially on their own. They're not puppets of America. In 1989, George Bush did what we see in 2025 Donald Trump has done. Noriega, who was a cartel boss, he was an authoritarian and vile leader of Panama. He was arrested. We sent troops in, and unlike what we see today with Venezuela and Donald Trump, not a Delta Force team, we sent in the army. We sent in a lot of the army. We had a couple thousand troops in Panama, and the Air Force, and the Marines, and the Navy. We actually invaded Panama. The full-on, what you think of in a movie, what you think of when you hear the word invasion, we did that in Panama. We surrounded, we took over the city, we took over the country. Then we eventually were able to capture Noriega, who was hiding out in a church, and he was seeking sanctuary. So we actually lived by sanctuary. He was in a church. We did not go in. We didn't break into the church. We didn't harm the church, the building, or any of its people, but we did force him out. They used music. They were blasting, I forget which music, I think it was Madonna. They were playing Madonna's songs 24 hours a day, blasting it. And he eventually just gave up. It was just the sound abuse, quite honestly. But he eventually gave up. And then he was brought to the United States. He was tried. He served time in prison in the United States. We then, after he served his sentence in the United States, he was given over to France so he could serve a 11-year sentence in France for money laundering, and then was returned back to Panama, where he spent the rest of his life in prison for murdering and his corruption and his murder of Panamanian people while he was in charge. He died in 2017. That is exactly what we are seeing right now. And at that time, we saw that the Panamanian people were happy. They were glad to get rid of Noriega. The international community, the poorer third world, second world nations, they were upset because they were afraid that this would create a new spiral of colonization, which never happened. That didn't happen, but they were afraid of it, and they were denouncing what George Bush had done because they thought it might start more colonization. Didn't happen. They were angry because the United States was asserting itself on a sovereign nation. Even though Noriega was charged, he had outstanding charges against him. He was considered an international criminal for some of the things, the death squads that he had. So the precedent is exactly what we saw with Venezuela and the Trump administration, exactly what we saw with Bush and the Noriega control of Panama. And the Panamanian people benefited from us removing that authoritarian and did not take over Panama. We did not. But we controlled it for a time until we had the Panamanian government adjust and they took over their country. Does that sound familiar to you? Because the mainstream news media doesn't talk about this. They're not citing this. At least throughout this entire morning, no one has mentioned 1989, Panama, George Bush. None of them have mentioned that. They have not addressed this because it is exactly the same scenario. And by the way, Democrats were pretty much happy with what Bush did. America was pretty much happy with what George Bush did in 1989. How is it different? It isn't. Now, and there was, by the way, and again, in 1989, Democrats supported George Bush in capturing Manuel Noriega in Panama. They were happy that the United States used our troops to literally invade, to cross the land and envelop, surround the capital, and wage siege warfare on Panama. Democrats supported this. They're not supporting Trump now because they don't like Trump. And they didn't like Bush, but they didn't demonize Bush like they demonize Donald Trump. It's not the same. The same level of hate did not exist. And they saw that Noriega and his drugs and his authoritarianism was far greater of a threat to national security of Americans than hating George Bush. Today, Democrats think there's nothing greater than saying Orange Man bad. Hating Donald Trump, MAGA, Republicans, there is nothing higher, nothing more evil, or nothing more that they can fight against. Everything is second to Donald Trump is evil. MAGA is evil. Republicans are evil. There is nothing greater. It doesn't matter what else is happening in the world. It doesn't matter how many wars have been stopped. It doesn't matter how many ceasefires there have been. Doesn't matter. Donald Trump has stopped 8 wars in the world to this point. We haven't even had him president for 1 year yet. And he has stopped 8 wars, more than most presidents do in 8 years. And that's still not good enough. He's doing the exact same thing that other presidents have done, both under the Donroe Doctrine and also in Panama in 1989, very specifically a almost carbon copy of what the United States already did. No one said George Bush was going to get impeached. No one tried to impeach George Bush for invading Panama and deposing Noriega. In fact, he was celebrated. George Bush was celebrated. No one was talking about impeaching him. Donald Trump has done exactly what George Bush did. But now Donald Trump, they're talking about, we got to impeach him. Even the libertarians are like, we got to impeach him. Chase Oliver, we've got to impeach him. What's different? What changed? Oh, you don't like Donald Trump. Yeah, but that's not evaluating what did he do. Is there precedent? Is this positive for America? Is this positive for the Venezuelan people? Are the Venezuelan people saying, oh my God, you've got to bring back, Maduro? You've got to give us back our dictator, put him back in power? They're not asking for that. They're not upset. Okay. Let me move forward. So one of the things, and I had to look this up, And this is Chat GPT. And I asked them, what is required for a declaration of war? Has anyone ever wondered, what do you need to do in the United States to declare war? Yes, it's an act of Congress. I understand that. And what does Congress have to, what has to happen for Congress to say, that's war? What does it take? And a lot of people don't realize, oh yeah, we had, well, Pearl Harbor. Yeah, but that was unique, but we also declared war on Bulgaria in World War II, not Germany. We declared war on Bulgaria. That got us into World War II. They didn't do Pearl Harbor to us. 9/11. There was no declaration of war. If Pearl Harbor is the example, that's what it takes for America to declare war. Well, that doesn't fit why we were in Vietnam or Korea. That doesn't fit 9/11. There's a lot of things that didn't fit. Or more importantly, 9/11, we should have been declaring war. We didn't. A lot of people don't realize we didn't declare war against Afghanistan or Iraq. Never. But we had 9/11. And if the precedent is, well, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, they attacked, Al-Qaeda attacked the Twin Towers and hid out in Pakistan and in Afghanistan and Iraq. They were running around in that whole region, hiding from the United States, hiding from repercussions that they knew were coming. We could have declared war against any of those nations and all of those nations. We could have. And Pearl Harbor was the precedent to say, yeah, that's good enough for us to declare war. And yet we didn't. So what does it take for a declaration of war? I actually looked it up. Congress has to agree. Okay. There has to be legislation, a joint resolution from the House and the Senate, and it has to be signed by the president. Okay. What does that mean? So in other words, anything can be an act of war. Anything can be identified as an act of war or ignored as an act of war. So someone can do something, a nation or an organization can commit an act of war, something that we would think of like 9/11, that would justify America going to war. And if Congress doesn't actually if they don't actually put out a bill and get it signed into law, it's not a war. That's true for Vietnam. That's true for Korea. That's true for dealing with Iraq and Afghanistan. We haven't had an actual war declared since World War II. A lot of people don't realize that, don't recognize that, haven't thought about it. We haven't officially had a war since 1942. World War II. That was the last time we actually declared war against anybody. And the last person we declared war against was Bulgaria, not Germany. I want to remind people, not Germany, not the Nazis. We declared war on Bulgaria. Okay. So, can the president, without a declaration of war, can he go out and take action on his own? Yes. And that is according to the Constitution, as well as the War Powers Act of 1973, as well as the authorization of military forces, uniform authorization of military forces. Yes, the president has the right. In fact, according to the Constitution, the president had even more power. And then we created the War Powers Act in 1973 to limit the power, because we got into the Korean War, we got into Vietnam without any other authorization. The president just said so. They just did it because the president said so. And it wasn't until after Vietnam in 1973 that Congress said, wait, that's just too much power for the president. Because the president, by the Constitution, does have the power to invade other nations. If you're following the Constitution, and that is your guideline, yes, the president has the power to send troops into a war or initiate a war or a conflict with other countries. It can be done. And it has been done. And it was lawful. Then we put in the War Powers Act. And I really want to emphasize the War Powers Act of 1973, which is what Chase Oliver, what Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, they're all trying to tell you that Donald Trump, he declared war on his own, which he didn't. Donald Trump hasn't declared war. We are not at war with Panama. We are not. Excuse me, with Venezuela. We're not at war. No one has ever suggested that we're going to war with Venezuela. Not a thing. We haven't invaded. We're not capturing the land. I showed you the images. You can see it. There's no American soldiers there. We can, if we are being attacked, we can go in and support our own people, but that's not what we're doing. So we don't need to declare war because we're not at war. We're not actively fighting. We went in, we got him, we're out. This is very pinpoint, kind of like with Iran. Did the president, any president, do they have the right to send bombers into Iran to blow up their nuclear facilities? Yes. That is, and that's why they screamed about, we got to impeach President Trump for blowing up Iran's nuclear capabilities, their ability to build a nuclear weapon to use against the United States and our allies in Europe, as well as in the Middle East. And he was never impeached. Why? Because he has the right. He has the power to do that. And it was a one-day war for the United States. It was the 12-day war between Israel and Iran, true, but for the United States, it was a one-day war. It wasn't even a full day. We had 11 hours. The bombers went over, they dropped the bombs, and they went back. The moment the bombs dropped, the United States said, by the way, we just took out your nuclear facilities. You guys barely even fired a missile, barely fired a rifle at our bombers. We're done. The war's over. Give up. And Iran did. And that's very much like what we had happen in right now in Venezuela. It was well planned, well designed. Unlike under the Biden administration, which we had the retreat from Afghanistan. Joe Biden tucked his tail between his legs and ran away. And he left for the Taliban. He gave the Taliban light armored vehicles, rifles, guns, ammunition, money, an entire base with all of the electronics, the computers, all of the circuitry, the programs. He gave them helicopters. He just ran away because he didn't plan on anything. He just said, get out now. In the Sudan, under Joe Biden, he took away the embassy, the United States Embassy in the Sudan. An embassy is the sovereign land of the United States, just like any embassy. That's that country's sovereign land. It is an island of safety if you are living overseas. And I've talked about living overseas. I've lived overseas. I've been to the American embassy in Moscow. And I always advise people, you have to know where that embassy is and how to get there 3 different ways in case something goes sideways in that nation. Because when you touch the ground of that embassy, you are safe. That isn't perfect. We saw that in Benghazi, but it is something that is a hard, fast rule. And 75, 80, 90% of the time, you will be safe if you can get to that embassy. Joe Biden, in 2023, closed the American embassy in the Sudan, took the troops, took the embassy workers, and abandoned it, and abandoned 16,000 Americans. He didn't think it through. Those 16,000 Americans, as Sudan went into another civil war because of Al-Qaeda, which is because of Afghanistan, because of Joe Biden, the consequences kept rippling out across the world, and that spilled into Sudan. 16,000 Americans, they had no safe place to go. The response by the Biden administration, the State Department under Joe Biden said, figure it out, find a way home. We can't help you. We got 300 people out of 16,000. We brought 300 people home. And the other 16,000 people, we told them, it's a civil war. Figure it out. Hope you make it home. That's what happens when you have no plan. Where running away in Afghanistan leads to the rise of a terrorist group, the Taliban, which helped to enable the resurgence of ISIS and Al Qaeda, who then went to Central Africa, started a bunch of wars, which then affected even more, tens of thousands of Americans, and put them in harm's way. And the Biden administration, having started these dominoes, ran away again. It's true. Look it up for yourself. April 23rd, 2023, May 5th, 2023. Look up the news. You can see what happened in the Sudan for yourself. The mainstream news media doesn't want to tell you that because, well, they don't want Republicans to win. MAGA's evil. We can't tell you the truth about Democrats. You might not vote Democrat if you see that they're willing to abandon tens of thousands of Americans and leave them in the middle of a war zone. You may not vote for those Democrats. So, that being said, Donald Trump has made plans. We're not doing this willy-nilly. Donald Trump didn't just take a bunch of bombers and bomb Tehran. He was very specific. He bombed the nuclear facility, specifically took it out and went home and said, we're done. And we were. He's gone into Caracas. He took Maduro. He took Maduro's wife. They were both already charged. They were indicted. He brought them to America. Done. We're done. We're not bombing Caracas right now. We're not fighting on the streets of Caracas in Venezuela right now. We're not doing that. The vice president of Venezuela is temporarily in charge. There is a transition that will happen, but the government still exists. The vice president is now the sworn president of Venezuela, interim. They will be changed. Another government will come in, but there is order. See the difference between a weak president, Joe Biden, who's a part-time zombie, and what we see with Donald Trump, a strong leader with a plan, which is very pinpoint and specific. And that's exactly what we saw in 1989, pinpoint and specific. And even in 1989, under the Bush administration, it was an even bigger invasion, and it was supported by Democrats. Democrats are more upset about a lesser event than what they had in the past, what they supported in the past. It just blows my mind. No one stopped to talk to you about this. Donald Trump didn't break the War Powers Act. I said all of that to get to this. The War Powers Act says that the president can still start activities. This is Barack Obama. Barack Obama was bombing with drones American citizens in Yemen. Yes, he authorized that. That's a fact. He was going in, oh, there's that American citizen. I don't like them. There are no charges against them. Drop a bomb on them. Oh, it was during a wedding. A bunch of civilians are there. Drop a bomb on them. That's what Barack Obama, the savior of Democrats and progressives, that's what he did. That's why his nickname around the world was Obama, because he would use drones to bomb Yemen and Pakistan all day, all night, and he would kill civilians on a regular basis. He killed American citizens that had never been charged with a crime. And Democrats were perfectly fine with that. And you ask them about the Barack Obama's term as president, and he did nothing wrong. It was all perfect. Everything was great. They still give him standing ovations and throw money at Barack Obama left and right. He was killing civilians, American civilians, without any charges, without any crimes, without any trial. So, Democrats, get off your high horse on morality. Your leadership isn't very moral. Okay? Let's start with that. And Obama was able to do that because War Powers Act. After he dropped the bombs, he went to Congress. He had 48 hours to go to Congress and say, I just dropped a bomb on a United States citizen in Yemen or in Pakistan. And as long as he did that, it's okay. He didn't break the law. It's not a war. And he's not impeachable on that. You could not impeach Barack Obama for dropping the bombs. Now, you could have impeached him for killing American citizens on foreign soil without any charges, without a trial. You could have, and they should have, but that wasn't the thing that was never brought up. No one said he broke the War Powers Act. Trump did the same thing. Went in, got him, came out. He's unimpeachable. He didn't break the War Powers Act. He has notified Congress indirectly with the press conference this morning. And he still has another 36 hours to go and speak to Congress and inform them of how he did exactly what he's already told us in the press conference that he did. He didn't break the War Powers Act. Donald Trump legally was able to do what he did, according to the law that Democrats put in place, that Democrats voted for, that Democrats did not use against Obama, even though they could have. So the War Powers Act is ridiculous. Saying that Donald Trump broke the War Powers Act is ludicrous. It's not true. It's a lie. Anyone tells you that doesn't understand what the War Powers Act is or how it works, nor have they looked at the precedent of how it has been used. Stop saying things that aren't true. I know a lot of Democrats are out there right now, Chuck Schumer, one of them, saying, no, but you just don't understand. I've read the War Powers Act several times. And I'm bringing it up for you from, look, to do the shorthand of it, I actually brought it up on ChatGPT. You can look it up for yourself. Donald Trump hasn't broken the law. This is the power of the presidency with the restriction of the War Powers Act. And he did not do anything wrong. Even if you want to look at the authorized use of military force, Donald Trump is compliant to the law. He didn't do anything more than the law allows. He cannot be impeached for that. Cannot. Now, I did promise, and by the way, not only did I check it on ChatGPT, I also looked it up on Grok. They agree. Almost word for word, they agree. So that's not been the problem. Now, and by the way, our good ally in England, the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer is like, I didn't do it. I didn't know about it. Starmer, you're weak. No one would have thought you were involved anyway. If you knew about it, it would have been the same as if Donald Trump had told Chuck Schumer that he was planning to do this. It would have been leaked, and Maduro would have heard about this, and it would have been a bigger firefight, and it would have been more people that would have died. That's why you didn't get told. Yes, England is our greatest ally in the world, and Starmer is as weak as Joe Biden was. He's useless. So, you know what? You didn't get told. You weren't part of the party because you're the problem, not the solution. Same thing with Congress. They're the problem, some of the Democrats in our Congress, like Ilhan Omar or Anna Presley, AOC. They're the problem, not the solution. They would have easily, willingly, absolutely gone out to tell Maduro about everything, every detail, to help him because it meant that Orange Man bad would fail. They're willing to harm the United States if it means political gain for themselves. You know, Keir Starmer thinks he's looking good, saying, I didn't have anything to do with this. Wait a minute. The United Kingdom considered Maduro illegitimate. The United Kingdom did not recognize him as the lawful legal leader of Venezuela, and they said he's illegitimate and illegal and an authoritarian. You should have been involved, but no one trusted you. And that's an indictment against the United Kingdom's Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. You agree with the United States. Even the Democrats say Maduro was a authoritarian. He was illegally in charge. And you should have known, but no one trusts you because you hate Trump and you put Donald Trump above anything else. He is the one thing that they are concerned with. They have to say Orange Man bad. It's kind of like no tips, no taxes on tips. California, Gavin Newsom of California, J.B. Pritzker of Illinois, and up until about 24 hours ago, Kathy Hochul of New York were trying to continue to tax American citizens, not because it was good for you. No. This, we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars could have been put back into the pocket of American citizens by not taxing their tips or their overtime. It's real simple. Just don't tax them and give them the money and let the American people spend the money on their own. And instead of doing that, because it was Donald Trump's idea, well, then they can't do it. And they were, oh my God, Orange Man bad, passed this law. It's a horrible law. This is terrible. We can't do that. We can't follow Orange Man bad. Wait a minute. You were elected to do the best thing for the people. Less taxes are good for poor people. It is a benefit. The people who make the most money in that scenario are the poor. They get to keep more of their money, thousands of dollars, almost the same as their income. They get to almost double their income by not paying these taxes. And you're saying no because you don't like the guy who came up with the idea? That's the argument? I can't agree with Orange Man bad. What? That's your argument? I have to lose $10,000 a year. You have to lose $10,000, $20,000 a year of your pay because Kathy Hochul, Gavin Newsom, and J.B. Pritzker have a problem, a personal dislike with Donald Trump. That's stupid. And that is more important to them than you, the person they swore an oath to protect and to serve. Are you surprised that those same people who are willing to punish you just to virtue signal against Donald Trump are the same people that are saying, hey, Venezuela, we have to impeach him because this is all evil, on laws that they passed that he has obeyed. He has done nothing more than what the law allows. I know no one's ever had this conversation with you and been honest with you and actually broke it down for you and actually looked at the arguments that are being made. Because CNN won't have this conversation with you because they look stupid if they do. Kathy Hochul, the Democrats out there, Chuck Schumer, AOC, they don't want to have this conversation with you because they can't justify what they're saying if it's not emotional. If they actually talk about the facts and the law and the context and the history and they show the examples, then they can't justify what they are saying. Because what they're saying is about propaganda. It's about getting votes in the 2026 midterm elections. It has nothing to do with what's actually happened. But I'm taking the time to do this. We're an hour and a half in. I've gone through a lot of information with you guys, and I'm showing you the sources, and I'm explaining how this happened and how it's affecting us at this moment. And the Democrats' arguments are just disappearing. They just get blown up. Mind you, if anyone disagrees with me, if anyone says, Mike, you just don't understand, fantastic, let's have this conversation. That's why we have the comments in the chat, and I keep going back to the comments in the chat. If you think I've misunderstood something, if you think the information I'm providing is wrong, let's have this conversation, but I'm not. Now, I will say, and I'm going to go into the comments in a second, there is one exception to this. There is one thing that could lead to Donald Trump being impeached. There is one justification that the left can use to try and impeach Donald Trump. Only one. Only one. The United States owns Venezuela. At this moment, we own it. We are in charge of the government. We are in charge of the resources. We are responsible for the people. That's a big one. So that is ownership. The United States, Venezuela is at this moment a territory of the United States. Donald Trump said almost as much in his speech, but he didn't get into details. He did say, we are going to control the new government. We are going to be leading Venezuela until a full transition into their new government, kind of like in Panama, except we're being far more overt and more directly in control of Venezuela. And we're going to use the oil companies. They're going to go back. Exxon is going to go back to their old Exxon plant, their oil factory, and they're going to rebuild their factory, and they're going to start shipping out oil again because it's their property. They paid for it in the first place, and they're going to fix it. And Venezuela will make money off that, and so will America. We're going to take some of the money off the sale of that oil, so Exxon will make money, America will make money, Venezuela will make money. Everybody's going to make money. But we're in charge. We're the ones who are allowing that infrastructure to come in. We're the ones who are going to help get the next group of people to be elected. We are, until they do take it, we are responsible for the people of Venezuela, making sure that they can get fed, that they can get their medication so they're not running around with measles and mumps, that they don't have to kill zoo animals anymore. We're going to help them. This is a good thing. This is why I always say America should take over. If we're going to fight, they'll fight. We own what we win. We're going to go in. We're going to rebuild. I've said this about Iraq. I said this about Afghanistan. I'm saying it about Venezuela. We go in. We will rebuild the nation. We will bring in new infrastructure. We will bring in trade. We will bring in stability. The people can prosper. We're going to do that. And because we are doing that, Donald Trump could be impeached. See, one of the tenets of war is you keep what you win. If you fight over a hill, you own that hill as long as you can control it. If you take a territory, you control that territory. It is yours until someone takes it away from you or you give it away. We know for a fact the Secretary of State, the President of the United States, and several other members of the United States cabinet will be directly involved in the day-to-day operations of Venezuela. It is a territory of the United States, temporarily, but a territory all the same. We own it. It's ours, which is a good thing. We will build the infrastructure. We will build business. Everyone will make money. Good for everybody. But we own it, which means it was conquest. It was a prize of war. The only way we could take over the country, the only reason that we can build the infrastructure, that we have total control over the infrastructure and the business and the resources and the government's operation, who's in charge, that means we own it. It's our territory, which means the president committed war. That's the logic there. If we didn't own it, we wouldn't be able to control all these things. So the president did not break the War Powers Act. He did not break the authorization of uniform authorization of military forces. He didn't break any of the laws. Mind you, even under the Constitution, President Trump could start a war and, he could start military action and take over territory. He could under the Constitution, under the powers, Article 1, Section 8, I believe it is. He could have taken over. But with the War Powers Act, with the authorization of military forces, that's where it's shaky ground. President Trump, because we own Venezuela effectively, not even effectively, in fact, we own Venezuela. that means he won it. It's a conquest. That means that's a war, or the next closest thing to a war. It's right on the edge of being at war, according to the Constitution, which the president has the power to do. The additional limitations created by Congress since 1973, Trump went further than those limitations to allow, because we own Venezuela, a sovereign nation. So on one hand, he went too far, but according to the Constitution, he didn't. That's the one thin sliver that Democrats can try and use to impeach Donald Trump. He violated the limitations of the presidency, but he didn't violate the Constitution. He's right in between. It's a gray area that no one's ever had to address before, because since 1973, we've never had a president with enough brass balls to say, if we fight, we own it. If we fight over it, we will own it, which is something I think I've always said we need to do. If we're going to fight over it, then we own it. Whether any American dies or is wounded or not, if we fight over it, we own it. And Donald Trump agrees. Even if it's just temporary, he agrees. But that means he violated the limitations since 1973, but not the Constitution. And so, did Donald Trump do something that's impeachable? Maybe. I'm willing to hear what people think about that, but that is a question. That is the fine line. You know, in that understanding, Trump is both guilty and innocent. He has done exactly what a president can do, and he's exceeded the power of a president under those conditions. Now, that's a difficult thing to say. And I'm not being, you can dislike Donald Trump. This isn't about feelings. This isn't about whether you like him or not. Who cares? You don't like him. I don't care. Changes nothing. If you don't like Donald Trump, we still own Venezuela. If you love Donald Trump, we own Venezuela. No, you don't think about Donald Trump at all. We still own Venezuela. Your feelings about Donald Trump are meaningless. So stop to the left, and everyone should stop talking about it. It means nothing. It is the least important thing on all of the things that we're talking about is how do you feel about Donald Trump? Who cares? It does not affect his ability to be efficient, to be effective. It doesn't affect the law. It has nothing to do with anything. It's meaningless. Democrats live and die on the fact that they don't like Donald Trump, and they want you to feel like they feel because they think that'll get them votes. But it affects nothing. It is unimportant. Maybe it changes the way some people vote. Okay, but that's it. It's not a big burden. So that's why you don't hear me talking about whether you like him or you don't. I don't care. I don't care about how you feel about Donald Trump. However you feel, you're a grown adult. You can feel any way you want. I don't care. But in terms of the law, that's the one thing. It is possible that Donald Trump could be impeached on that distinction, and they have to be very clear. He didn't break the Constitution. He broke the limitations since 1973. Which one is the president truly? What is the absolute thing that the president is held by? The Constitution or the limitations from Congress? Which one is the final standard we hold presidents to? No one's ever asked. No president had the balls. We should have taken over Grenada. We should have taken over Panama. We should have taken over Iraq. We should have taken over Afghanistan. I know all of my friends who are libertarians, all of the friends I have that are pacifists, they're going, Mike, but you're being you, Mike. Yes, I am, because I'm not a pacifist. And I do believe that I don't care. Oh, but you're being a colonizer. So? And? What's the hell is that supposed to mean? That's neither good nor bad. You colonize them. So what? Every country that exists today is the winner of a battle of colonization. None of these countries are the original countries. None of the people in any country on the face of the earth today in 2025 are the original people, the indigenous people of that land. None of them, anywhere in the world. Please stop with the silliness. Stop that. Oh, but you're colonizing. So? Does that mean, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Oh, but you're colonizing them. Yeah, we're bringing in water and electricity, medicine, doctors, commerce. We're helping to rebuild the lives and giving all of the Venezuelans that ran to every other part of the world, that are over in Madrid, that are down in Chile, that are in El Salvador, that are in Mexico, in the United States. We're giving them back their country with more electricity, with more doctors, with more water, with more infrastructure. They can live in their home better. After what we are going to do, what we have said, we are going to rebuild the infrastructure. They will have a better home to come back to than they left. And you're going to say, but you're colonizing. Really? That's what you're upset about? That virtue signal? You'd rather let the people starve to death than live and get medicine, have a doctor, have education for their kids, electricity for their homes. You don't want any of that because you're colonizing them. How dare you give them electricity? You're a colonizer. How dare you give their kids medication? Let those kids get measles and mumps. This is what the left is telling you. They would rather let kids have measles and mumps rather than let that kid get medication and live in a house with electricity. Because colonizer, you're an idiot. Anyone who thinks that is an idiot. That is a stupid set of logic. Those are horrific. Your morality is horrific. If you think, oh my God, colonizer is the worst thing you could possibly be, without taking into consideration anything else, any of the benefits. Oh, but it's colonizing. They're not, that's not the indigenous. They weren't the indigenous people anyway. They haven't been for 1,000 years. Stop lying to yourself, because you're not lying to me. But I am willing to hear other arguments. I could be wrong. Give me your best argument. I could be wrong. So let me stop here for a second. Yes, there is still more. This is all based on what happened yesterday, this morning, and the speech by Donald Trump. And I'm trying to break it all down for you so you guys can see this. Because now we're starting to talk about what's going to happen. We understand the context. We understand the past. We understand the precedent, many of them. We understand the legality. And now we understand the one loophole that might cause trouble for Donald Trump. We've gone through all of that. Now we can actually evaluate what's the future. Now we can talk about what's the potential good and what's the potential bad. We can actually have that conversation now that we actually understand what is happening, which the mainstream media is not doing. Right now, all they're talking about is Donald Trump's bad. Why? Because Donald Trump did it. Just like they said that Donald Trump's bad. Why? Because he said no tax on tips. That's why Gavin Newsom's not going to do it. That's why J.B. Pritzker is not going to do it. That's why Kathy Hochul was trying not to do it, because Donald Trump said it. So it must be bad, which is stupid. That is stupid. That is not logical. That doesn't make any sense. All right, let me go back to the comments. I know there's a bunch of comments here. I hope people are enjoying this. I hope, whether you agree with me or not, I hope you are fine. You're understanding why I'm making these arguments, why we're having this discussion, why we need to understand what happened to get us to where we are right now. I hope you understand that. And hopefully you'll like, share, subscribe. I haven't mentioned it, but if you've been with me for the last almost 2 hours, like, share, subscribe. Share this with your friends. Let the lefties lose their mind as they look at the context and go, oh, yeah, Trump really didn't break any law, did he? Yeah, that's kind of upsetting. But let me go on, because I do see Klaus. Klaus, I see you. I'm going to get to your comments in a moment. Remember, folks, you can also, if you want to get to your comments faster, you can super chat. You can do a Rumble rant. And of course, I will respond to that as fast as possible, just so you know. Okay, so Joel says, so I was mentioning about how in Panama against Noriega, during the George Bush administration, 1989, they used Madonna music to force Noriega to give up. And he goes, Taylor Swift would be the music we would use today. Instead of Madonna back then, we'd use Taylor Swift today. I don't know. I actually have no idea about any Taylor Swift song. I don't think I've ever heard a Taylor Swift song. So I can't speak to that. And I know she's an artist. People talk about her all the time. I know nothing about her. Nothing. Let's see. And actually, Klaus. Here's the first comment. By the way, Klaus, first time that I think this is the first time I've seen you leave a comment. I thank you for being part of my audience. I thank you for the comment. I hope you're involved in the conversation here. Let me read your comment. Klaus says, the United States blew up oil pipes from Russia to Germany under Biden's watch. You're talking about the Nord Stream 1 pipeline, which is not confirmed that that was the United States. But okay, that's an act of war and severely damaged Germany's economy. It's not an act of war because we are not at war with Germany. One, not proven. I know that's a theory. I do not know that we have, I forgot who they were thinking did it, but no concrete evidence ever said the United States did it, as I recall. If I've forgotten that, please remind me. At the same time, even if we did, Germany has never declared war against us. They've never said that's an act of war. Again, the only thing that would be an act of war is if their government said it's an act of war. If the United States government said it's an act of war, then it would be an act of war. It's not an act of war. You can say it's something really bad. Let's assume that Democrats under Joe Biden did blow up the Nord Stream pipeline. Okay. That's evil. That would be bad. True. Still not an act of war. I know people think, well, that must be. No, it's not. It's not. Just like 9/11 wasn't an act of war. We never declared war against anyone. We did a lot of fighting, but we never declared war against anyone. 9/11 wasn't an act of war. An act of war is just language that we use to explain the magnitude of something that's happened. And the media loves to play with these words to manipulate your emotions. And the left and the right will do this on a regular basis to get you involved, to get you behind whatever they want to do as a consequence of that. But in and of itself, not an act of war. But I get your point. I do get your point. Dow says it took place mostly in international waters, and then a singular invasion to crush the Barbary state. Oh, Venezuela. So most of what we've been dealing with Venezuela has been happening in international waters. That's true. And then there was this singular invasion to crush the government. That's true. It was very straightforward. Dow goes on to say, as far as I know, there was no act of Congress to authorize those actions. That's true, but there doesn't need to be. So the actions in the international waters does not require an act of Congress to do. Although we do have regulations, international regulations about maritime law and protecting the borders and the waters, international waters and sovereign waters of the United States. There are laws about that. We violated none of them. The United States has the authorization and the right to blow up drug boats trying to enter the United States international waters that are not identified by a flag of any nation. They are considered pirates. And in international waters, pirates can be sunk. That is a fact. We didn't violate any laws. Now, people may not like it, and it may be something that pisses people off. It's not a crime. Going to Klaus says, Israel is a pain in the butt. I don't agree. Plus 70,000 dead in Gaza. I don't think the number's quite that high. Talk about war crime, innocent people murdered. No, I do not agree with you. Sorry, I've talked about this a lot. Since October 8th, 2023, we have talked in depth on a regular basis about Hamas and the war that Hamas started with Israel. Hamas did not value its own people. They don't care about the Palestinians. They knew there would be a war as a retaliation of Hamas massacring 1,200 innocent civilians from 56 countries around the world. They knew there would be a retaliation against Hamas and the people in Gaza and the Western Strip. They knew there was going to be a massive military backlash against them that was going to cost hundreds, thousands of lives long before it ever ended when they took 256 civilians hostage that they sexually abused and tortured every single day for 842 days. And they didn't care. They didn't care about how many Palestinians would be killed. They had an entire year with 24 different offers for a ceasefire. 24 times they were offered conditions for ceasefire. And every single one of them, including the 25th offer, which included the same thing. The one stipulation every single time was give back the hostages. That was it. And 24 out of 25 times, Hamas said no and was willing to let people die, civilians and soldiers to die, because they didn't want to give up the hostages that they kept killing. Yeah, Hamas is the problem, not Israel. You may not like Israel. That's up to you. And I'm not saying they're a perfect nation. They're not. There is no such thing. And you can say, well, some of the things they did were overkill. Fantastic. Hamas knew exactly what it was getting into. Hamas had the opportunity to end this easily for more than a year. I have no pity for them. None. Hamas were the bad guys. You don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with me. Klaus says, yes, I voted for Trump 3 times. So I'm not whack out lunatic. Well, whether you voted for Trump 3 times or not does not mean you are or not a lunatic. I don't think that's relevant. That's not a one-to-one equation there. Chinese have been supplying fentanyl chemicals to other countries. That's true. U.S. should confiscate those ships. I think they should. I agree with you there. He goes on to say, the CIA can transplant Zelensky to Venezuela. Okay, his name's not spelled that way. So you're talking about Zelensky, who is the president of the Ukraine. Why would the CIA move Zelensky to Venezuela? I don't understand that. Shelley says, my uncle designed and built offshore drilling in Venezuela. So my cousins grew up in Venezuela. In the 1970s, Hugo Chavez threw out the gringos, and the American headlines said they bought out American oil interests, but the truth was they got pennies on the dollar or nothing at all. Then my young cousin was beat up because he was an American, so they left. Yeah, he didn't pay for anything. Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, they didn't pay for anything. They nationalized it. It was part of the socialist movement. They took all the private businesses and the nation took it. That is socialism. That's one of the things socialists do. It's the government's control over business. You don't own anything. The government does. You work for the government. Your boss is the government under socialism. And so you have nothing except what the government gives you. So you don't own a house. The government allows you to live in a house. You don't have a business. The government allows you to manage a business. You have nothing in socialism. The state has everything. And that's one of the problems with socialism. And it's very rarely conveyed in that honest manner. So I'm sorry that your family had to go through that, but thank you for sharing that with us. Klaus says, Venezuela has more potential of establishing goals compared to the Middle East. Well, the Middle East has religion as a major factor, a big part of the problem with what's going on in the Middle East. And that's not just Israel, Jewish people versus Muslim people, but it's also between Muslim people. There are Shia and there are Sunni Muslims. They hate each other. Muslims fight, the various Muslim nations are fighting because you have the wrong religion just as much as they're trying to fight the Jews and Christians. Because if you don't have the right type, like if you don't believe what the Ayatollah believes, which is Muslim, but it is a very specific form of the Muslim faith, if you don't believe the Ayatollah, they will kill you. But that doesn't mean that that belief isn't the same belief as in Saudi Arabia or in the United Arab Emirates. They have entirely different beliefs. They fight each other as much as they fight anyone else. So religion is a massive component of what happens in the Middle East, unlike what we see in most anywhere else in the world, and as an example, in Venezuela. So there you go. Oh, Klaus is mad at me. Klaus is mad at me. I just saw this. Klaus just said, the way you read comments, you miss the point. Been nice. Bye. Bye, Klaus. I read the comments as I read them. Your words, I read them. If you didn't know this, Klaus, there is no intonation in a text. I don't know the subtext of your words in a text. I can only read what you wrote. So if you think that if I'm reading it wrong, tell me why. But if you're upset, you wrote it, not me. I'm just reading it out for people. These are your words. So if I miss your point, write your point over. Make it more clear. Obviously, you weren't clear enough. So, you want to get mad at me, you can't. It's not my fault. You wrote it. I'm just reading it. I can't read your mind. But Klaus did say before he left, no doubt Biden was a zombie after his brain surgery in 2017 to 18 around that time. I saw a big change in Biden before he stole office. I can't speak to that. I don't know if it was because of the surgery. What I do know, and it has been reported and confirmed, that in 2020 and in 2021, when Joe Biden won the election, he was already suffering mental issues, and his top staff knew it. And I would believe that the news media that were following him every single day and also became part of the White House pool, they knew, they could see every day the way it was affecting him. They knew about this. They knew it for years before we knew about it. As Biden was in office, he got worse and worse and worse and became a part-time zombie president. That's true. When did he get far enough in? Was it in 17, 18? I don't know. But I do know that from 2020 moving forward, we now know that the media, CBS, NBC, ABC, Jake Tapper, all of these people, many of the high-level politicians, that would be Chuck Schumer, that would be Nancy Pelosi and others, they knew, and they didn't tell the public. And that's a problem. They knew and didn't tell us. Let's see. Shelley says, we maintain communications with her family via ham radio in Venezuela when the communications ended when Chavez got in charge and he stopped everyone. Shelley goes on to say, the people have been oppressed for nearly half a century, and she's concerned they no longer understand what it means to be free. I don't think that's the case. As an example, the Russian people were Soviets. They were socialists for 75 years in a row. And once that broke under Gorbachev, 91, we really saw that break down. And capitalism re-entered. The Soviet Union broke apart. They became the Commonwealth of Independent States, the CIS. And they, while different parts of what used to be Russia or the old Soviet Union, some of the parts had difficulty. Yes, very much like what you're describing, they didn't know how to be capitalist anymore. They didn't know how to be independent anymore. It had been beaten out of a lot of the people. But the thing about human nature is, given opportunity and time, most people will be individuals. It just is a natural thing. That is part of being human. Sometimes it takes longer to reawaken. Maybe it takes a generation, but it happens. And we see that in Russia today is nothing like the Soviet Union used to be. That's just a difference of 30 years. One generation, literally about one generation, and they have completely changed. And I would say the same thing will likely be in Venezuela. Given a generation, you will see an entirely different environment. You will see Venezuela thrive again as it did before the socialism came in, before the authoritarianism came in. And if America does in fact rebuild the infrastructure, water, power, medicine, schools, if we are able to do that, then I am sure it would take less than a generation for their individual spirit to take hold and improve that nation. I truly do believe that. But we will see. We will see. Klaus goes, okay, Klaus says, if you research history of the British Empire last 400 years, very shocking what they did. In comparison, they make the Nazis look like Girl Scouts. I'll debate anyone on what I just said. There are lots of nations, and most of the empires of history haven't been that great. But I still think the Nazis and their consequences were far worse. No one has to agree with me, but I just think they were worse. Yeah, the British Empire, 400 years, had a lot of low points, had a lot of high points too. Nazis just had low points. They're just bad people. There is no positive, no offsetting thing that they did. But that's the way I look at it. Let's see, I'm catching up. Pre-1973 war powers limitations. I don't think Jefferson was given congressional authorization to go to Tripoli and crush the Barbary state. No. As far as I know, he wasn't. The Marines were sent by Jefferson to Tripoli. That's why it's part of the Marine Corps hymn, the battle hymn of the United States Marines, to the shores of Tripoli. Because that's where we were sent to fight the Barbary pirates, in part to protect American trades and shipping and our shipping and trafficking of goods. And so we were fighting the Barbary pirates for the United States, but also for the benefit of Africa, of Tripoli, of Libya. So it was a little of both. But it was understood it was in the best interest of the United States to be able to have free trade, and therefore the Marines going to a foreign land and fighting pirates that weren't affecting America directly, but they were affecting America indirectly. Those pirates are very much like the cartels today. The cartels don't directly affect national security. They're not going to set off a nuke. No, of course not. But the fact that they are promoting slavery and they're promoting drugs and drug abuse, these are things that eat away at our society and increase the burden placed on our society. And so they're just as much of a threat as the Barbary pirates back then. So I agree with you. Presidents have the power. Again, constitutionally, Donald Trump perfectly in line with the Constitution, with what he did in Venezuela. According to the War Powers Act, not so much. It's a fine line. So can Trump be impeached? Probably not. And I don't think he will be. But I'm sure Democrats will say it, but they probably won't say it for the reason I just pointed out. That's the one legal loophole they could actually try to address, and they won't. They're going to say it's just, orange man bad. He's just a horrible, evil person. He's an authoritarian. None of those things have anything to do with the Constitution. None of those things are what's been apparent. But that's emotion for you. They will go after the emotion. They won't go after any of the facts because the facts don't support their emotional feelings. Okay. So we're up to date on all of the comments, and I thank you all for the comments that we got. Not done yet, though. We've covered a lot of ground. It's only been 2 hours and change. I hope, please do like, share, subscribe. I really do appreciate it. By the way, Klaus, I'm not upset with you. I'm not upset. You may be mad at me because I didn't understand your comment, and I apologize if I misunderstood it, but at the same time, write a better comment. I can't read context or intonation in what you write. But I hope you enjoyed the show while you have been here, and hopefully you'll come back again. You're still welcome. All right. So here's the problem with Bondi. So we talked about what's one of the problems that could affect Trump. Here's the problem with Bondi. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, before Donald Trump had his speech with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Pam Bondi released this statement on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. She goes, Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Cecilia Flores, have been indicted in the Southern District of New York. Nicolas Maduro has been charged with narco-terrorism conspiracy. I don't know what that is. I'm not familiar with that charge, but okay. But it does exist. Okay, fair enough. Cocaine importation conspiracy, possession of machine guns and destructive devices, and conspiracy to possess machine guns and destructive devices against the United States. I'm going to read the rest of the comment, but that whole section makes no sense. And I think this is where Pam Bondi has failed the American people, and she's going to screw up this case against Maduro. Just that section there. But let me continue with the rest of what she says. She goes on to say, they will soon face the full wrath of American justice on American soil in American courts. On behalf of the entire United States Department of Justice, I would like to thank President Trump for having the courage to demand accountability on behalf of the American people, and a huge thank you to our brave military who conducted the incredible and highly successful mission to capture these two alleged international narco traffickers. Okay, that whole bottom section there is just useless crap. That is just political glad handing. It's useless. Means nothing. Throw that out. Don't even pay attention to it. Yeah, my boss is great. Being a Republican is great. Blah, blah, blah. Who cares? No one cares. The first part, okay. He has been indicted. There is a reason why we would go after him, why he was taken in custody by U.S. law enforcement as well as Delta Force. The military brought the law enforcement to Maduro to arrest him, to bring him back. Okay. The part that I think is important here is this part. Nicolas Maduro, mind you, they didn't mention his wife, but I guess he's an accessory to the fact. We're not getting clear there, but okay. So Maduro is charged with, and this is the part that really just gets me, narco-terrorism conspiracy. That's not very clear. Drug terrorism, okay. Cartel, I kind of get it. Okay, fine. Cocaine importation. Okay, I get it. Again, drug dealing. Okay, that's a crime. Gotcha. Possession of machine guns and destructive devices. That's not a crime. That's not crime in America. That's not a crime. I know New York State wants it to be a crime. Dexter Taylor is suffering because Democrats think that's a crime. It's not a crime. It is not a crime to own a firearm or a destructive device. So in other words, you can own a mine. You can own a flamethrower. You can own a rocket or a rocket launcher. You can own a tank. These are destructive devices. You can own them. That is, not only is it legal, it is enshrined in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. You have that right by birth, both because of self-defense against others and self-defense against the government. You are innately guaranteed that. That is a right internationally. So if Maduro was an American citizen, he would have a right to that machine gun, of which 743,000 Americans own machine guns in America at this moment. That's not a crime. Pam Bondi is the Attorney General. She should know better. Maduro owning a machine gun or a tank or an airplane as the leader of his country, even if he wasn't the leader of his country, that is not a crime. Even in Venezuela, under Venezuelan law, it's not a crime for Maduro to have a machine gun, a tank, or a fighter jet. Pam Bondi is wrong. That is a loophole, and that helps Maduro. This is a problem. Pam Bondi should know better than this. She goes on to say, Maduro is being charged with conspiracy to possess machine guns and destructive devices against the United States. That's not a crime. That is not a crime. That's ridiculous. So Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of England, who is terrified of any use of force, he is milquetoast. He is the English Premier. And Keir Starmer has possession and access to and conspiracies with machine guns, tanks, fighter jets, submarines, battleships. And some of his policies are against the United States. Are we going to arrest him? No, we're not. Emmanuel Macron, the Prime Minister of France, has access to nuclear submarines and nuclear missiles. And he is not aligned. He hates Donald Trump. He hates Donald Trump. He wants Donald Trump arrested for anything he can think of and anything he can get away with. He's trying to make deals with China right now. He's been doing that since March of 2023, that he has openly said he is trying to help China replace the United States for the EU and for France. He is sucking the socialist rod hard. He has nuclear weapons. Is that a conspiracy against the United States? That doesn't make any sense. It isn't a crime in that country. It is not a crime for Macron to have access to these things, for Keir Starmer to have access to these things. It's not a crime in Venezuela for Maduro to have access to these things. How can you charge him with a crime? It's not a crime in America either. And he's going to conspire to have these things against the United States. What does that mean? Maduro was not trying to create a civil war in the United States. Maduro wasn't going to invade the United States. Now, if you're telling me he's drug trafficking into the United States, yes, you got it. You're saying that he's human trafficking into the United States. Yes, you've got him. Absolutely. There are certain crimes that we can definitely agree with, but a machine gun, it makes no sense. That's not a charge. Having a machine gun isn't illegal in his country. And having having a firearm in his country and not liking the United States is not a crime. Those are not crimes. What is Pam Bondi doing? It makes no sense to me. That is one of the worst sets of charges I have ever heard. It makes no sense. Makes no sense. Pam Bondi, she every so often does something and she gets it right, and then she turns around and does something stupid. It makes no sense. It looks weak, and if that's the way we're going to prosecute Maduro, he will get off, which is a fear that some of the people, Gracie was talking about. She's terrified, and I can understand. In listening to Pam Bondi say this, in reading that, I was like, oh my God, this guy might get off. He might be free. He may not be charged with any of the crimes that he's committed. He can get away with it. She's giving him a get out of free charge. It's just, I don't understand that. Maybe others do. Maybe someone's looking at that and go, they get it. I don't. Hang on one second, folks. So Dal is asking if I have all of my messages activated, or is it YouTube? Are they showing me only the top? I'm using Restream. I should be getting all comments, good, bad, positive, negative. If it's on YouTube, someone's saying it in chat, I should be able to see it. If I'm not, that means YouTube is banning people. I have not banned anyone. As an example, Klaus is still welcome to speak. He can tell me, he can be mad at me, he can yell at me. By the way, if you're going to curse me out, pay me, do it as a super chat. Then you can curse me out, and that's fine. But, he can yell at me, he's mad, or he's happy. That's fine. I don't mind people having a different opinion. I'm not blocking anyone. Unless you're spam, I'm not blocking you. So it's not me. If anyone's comments are being blocked, that is because of YouTube, and I apologize for that. But yeah, not me. He goes on to say, it so far has failed to pop up a few comments of mine for you to see. It's possible. YouTube, I don't think they like that I'm having this conversation with the public, being this honest, this open, and this direct. And I think YouTube, which believes Chuck Schumer, they believe AOC, they believe the Democratic support of these authoritarian dictators, actual dictators. And so they don't like this channel, and we're being suppressed, which is why it's so important, folks. Like, share, subscribe. Subscribe. Please subscribe. So important. But that could be the case. All right. Let me go on. By the way, if anyone wants to see the War Powers Act, and if you're wondering, you can go to congress.gov. I will have the links in the description after the show. You can see the entire War Powers resolution, the summary of the act itself, and what it does. So I have that link for you. You don't have to rely on CNN to tell you what they think it is. This is, here's the link to actually let you find it yourself to see what the actual law is. Let's see. So, U.S., according to CBS News, U.S. strikes Venezuela and captures Maduro. Trump says we're going to run the country for now. And that is my concern. That is the one concern I have. Because that could get Trump impeached. But is it a problem for America that Venezuela is our territory? No. Is it bad for Venezuelans? No. It's good for everybody. This is a win-win. We get some of their resources, and yes, oil. Was this all about oil? I know people are always going, but it's about oil. Oh my God, it was all about oil. And was Maduro a authoritarian? Did he have death squads killing his own people? The answers to those are yes. He was an authoritarian, and he was having death squads kill his own people. His own people couldn't get medication, basic medication. Measles and mumps is basically eradicated in every first and second world nation in the world. Only the poorest of nations have any difficulty with measles and mumps. That's just a fact. And it has been nearly eradicated. And Maduro starved his own people and denied them this basic, absolutely basic health care. He's an evil person. So I'm looking at this and I don't understand how Democrats can be like, oh, but it's so bad. Why? Why is it bad for America making sure that the basic health care of the world is available for people in Venezuela? And they think Maduro's better? Makes no sense to me. Makes no sense. Let me see where we left off. So there's a lot of countries that are talking about this, and they don't really have anything to say when it comes to this. I'll give you an example. So here's the United Kingdom. Again, this is the BBC. So the BBC. And they're like, hey, Trump says he's going to run Venezuela. Okay. Is this a bad thing? No. Oh my God, but it's colonizing. That's the implication. The left-leaning sources are all like, oh my God, but colonizing. And is that the only thing you can think of? Is that the only problem? If that's the only problem, win-win, go for it. Who cares? Here's the thing. Let's assume that we don't have a time frame. Here's my problem. Donald Trump hasn't explained what's the time frame. It's at least 1 year, based on the speech given by President Trump. Well, not the speech, but the press conference of President Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, listening to their comments, answering questions, and their speech. We know that the United States will have control over Venezuela for the next year, at least 1 full year. So the new government for Venezuela will not come in until at the earliest 2027. That's a fact. Could be even later than that, but at the earliest 2027. So for at least the next 12 months, the United States, according to what was said, is going to have control. And Venezuela will be a territory of the United States. Fine. And let's assume that at the end of the next year, 12 months from now, January 2027, Venezuela decides with their new leader or the Venezuelan people, and they decide they want to be a commonwealth of the United States. They want to be like Puerto Rico. Okay. And then they can go generations. Every 2 generations, they get to vote and decide, do you want to stay a commonwealth? They could say no. They could become independent. But they would lose some of the support that America is going to be putting into them right now. They may like being a territory. They may want to be a territory or a state or a commonwealth. The media isn't mentioning that they haven't asked anyone. They want you to think it's a bad thing, but they haven't actually asked anyone and said, what do you think? They're not asking the Venezuelan people, hey, do you want to be, is it okay if America owns your land, owns your country, as we build the country for you? we make it better for you to live, make it better for your kids to live. No one's asking them. I think that's the important thing. I don't know. But yeah, there's some more coverage of this, and I'm just looking to see if there's anything new. Again, Venezuelans in Florida are celebrating. As much as the left is trying to tell you this is such a terrible idea, Venezuelans are happy about this. All the Venezuelans all around the world, they're happy. So that should make you think this isn't Orange Man bad, but yet Democrats and the left can only say this is Orange Man bad. This is so terrible. The Venezuelans don't think so. Again, this is from the BBC, and they're telling you, I mean, this is one of the most recent things. The Venezuelans are happy. I keep finding places all around the world that Venezuelans as refugees had to run to, and they're all celebrating. They think this is wonderful, and they know that the United States is colonizing, and they're happy. Maybe the left is wrong, just maybe. Keir Starmer says, the United Kingdom, sheds no tears. This is 1989 all over again. The world was mad because the United States did something and no one else is doing anything like it. And no one can do anything about it. But they're happy. They didn't want Maduro, just like they didn't want Noriega. They don't want them in charge. They want more stability. They don't want the threat of the cartels. But everyone else in the world is too scared or incapable of doing anything about it. So when the United States does it, oh, we're going to yell at them. Oh, we're going to scold you. But thank you. Then comes the thank you. First they're like, I didn't do it. It wasn't me. That's Keir Starmer. I already showed you. First thing he said is, I didn't do it. I had nothing to do with it. By the way, it's good news. Thank you. I was afraid to do anything. I didn't have the power to do anything. His politics don't allow anything. But he's thankful because no one is going to shed a tear for Maduro because he was an authoritarian. He was evil. He abused his people on a regular basis. Trump is better. Period. Full stop. Colonizing is better. Full stop. Oh, I wanted to cover this here. So here's a statement. This is Hakeem Jeffries. Hakeem Jeffries has something to say about this. Hakeem Jeffries says, Nicolas Maduro is a criminal and an authoritarian dictator who has oppressed the people of Venezuela for years. He's a bad guy. He is not the legitimate head of the government. He's illegal. Undoubtedly, the rule of law and democracy have broken down in Venezuela, and the people of that country deserve better. That's why they're celebrating, because they have better. Donald Trump is in charge. They're celebrating because they're getting better than Maduro. This is a good thing. Somehow, in just the first paragraph, Hakeem Jeffries is completely disconnected from the reality that we see around the world, that everyone else can figure out. Even Keir Starmer is kind of getting it. But, Hakeem Jeffries can't get past Orange Man bad. He has TDS that hard that he can't understand why Venezuelans say this is better, that this is a good thing. He can't get it, even though he knows this guy's a criminal. Maduro was a criminal. He was illegal. He was horrible. This is better. Oh, no, but Orange Man bad. Orange Man bad. Orange Man bad. It's so embarrassing. He goes on to say, Donald Trump has constitutional responsibility to follow the law and protect democratic norms in the United States, like the Donroe Doctrine, like we saw with JFK, like George Bush did in 1989. Donald Trump is following the norms of United States policy and protecting the interests of the United States long term. What's the problem? Oh, but Hakeem Jeffries doesn't want you to think about that. Again, He didn't want you to recognize the Monroe Doctrine. He didn't want you to think about what we've done in the past in South America and Central America. He doesn't want you to think about what happened in 1989 with Panama and Noriega. He doesn't want you to recognize that this is a positive. And the very people most involved, the Venezuelans, are happy because they recognize that Donald Trump is following the laws and the democratic norms of the United States, and that's why it's good for them. But Hakeem Jeffries can't say that because 2026 midterm elections. Jeffries goes on to say the Trump administration has not sought congressional authorization, doesn't need it, for the use of military force and has failed to properly notify Congress in advance of the operation in Venezuela. He doesn't need to notify you. The War Powers Act of 1973, he has 48 hours after the fact that he can notify Congress. He has no obligation, no president has any obligation to notify Congress before they do something. Obama didn't notify anyone before he started bombing American citizens with drones in Yemen. He didn't notify anyone before, he notified them after. So is Trump. He hasn't broken the law. I've been very clear about that. I've gone through that already. That was in the first hour. We went through that in detail. Hakeem Jeffries is lying to you. He thinks you're stupid. He thinks you haven't read the War Powers Act. He thinks you don't understand what the War Powers Act says. I've shown you the link, and I will have it in the description after the show. I showed you even ChatGPT. You can cheat and just use ChatGPT or Grok, and they will tell you in the shortest form possible that Donald Trump doesn't need to do what Hakeem Jeffries just said he has to do. Hakeem Jeffries is lying to you because Hakeem Jeffries wants power, because Hakeem Jeffries has TDS. By the way, Hakeem Jeffries, if you're listening to this, let's have a debate. Let's talk about the War Powers Act. Let's go into the War Powers Act because you seem to not understand it, even though you're a member of Congress. You should know about this. Your team should have informed you before you made this post of what the War Powers Act is. You don't care. So you're willing to lie to the American people again, to lie to their face again about what the law is. That's a problem. That is a massive problem. You are manipulating the public because you want to win an election. And Donald Trump is trying to improve lives. American lives, Venezuelan lives. He's trying to improve people's life. You, Hakeem Jeffries, are trying to get political power. You, Hakeem Jeffries, are a slug. Okay, one other thing. We're just about done with the show. I love this. Emma Summerlin points out how many times did Obama drop a bomb but didn't declare a war? And she brought up a couple of things that I didn't bring up. In Libya in 2011, Pakistan from 2019 until 2016, that's 7 years. In Yemen from 2009 until 2016, 7 years. I did mention that a couple of times. Somalia from 2009 until 2016, 7 years. Iraq and in Syria from 2014 into 2016, that's 2 years. Not one Democrat had a problem with it. Not one Democrat said, well, you need authorization from Congress. You can't do that. They're hypocrites. They are full-on absolute hypocrites. And they're lying to you because they think you don't understand. What does this all mean? What does this all mean? At the end of the day, it means America's strong. It's telling cartels, back down. It's telling the cartels you're going to be held accountable. And the United States can reach you anywhere. Oh, you're going to hide in a country? It could be anywhere in South America, Central America, Mexico, you're going to hide out. We'll come get you anyway. We're not afraid of other countries. We're not afraid of other governments. We're not afraid of the backlash from the UN or any of the liberal nations. If you're hurting the American people, if you're trafficking human slavery, you're selling drugs to Americans, making our society weak. If you're working with Iran or China illegally, breaking sanctions, we will hold you accountable. And we're not afraid to go anywhere in the world to do that. We've said a statement between bombing in Iran and what happened today in Venezuela. All of the terrorist organizations of the world are terrified. Donald Trump will reach out and touch you, and he will do it with a big bomb if he needs to. Donald Trump will take action. Obama wouldn't. He'll drop some bombs, but he's not a hands-on, strong guy. He wasn't. Joe Biden didn't know what the hell he was doing. He just ran away from everything. And he counted on the media covering it up, lying to the public, hiding the truth, kind of like Hakeem Jeffries, which I just showed you. So there's that. But Donald Trump, he's a strong president. He's kind of like Ronald Reagan. Oh, the cowboy, the American cowboy. That American cowboy who is part of the cavalry that comes to save you at the end of the movie when no one else will. He's the drifter that goes from town to town, saving the innocent and punishing the bad guys, like all of the American movies. Yeah, we got a president that's a cowboy. That's not a bad thing, and the rest of the world knows it. The rest of the world is happy for an American cowboy being president because it means they're safe. It means they're going to be safer than they were when the weak guy, the guy who's like, I'm a pacifist, I love everybody, kumbaya, let's get in a group hug. Yeah, that guy's going to get you killed. That guy's going to get your country taken over. That guy will let you starve to death. But the cowboy will save you. The cowboy will protect you. If you're one of his friends, he will go out of his way to make your life better. If you're a bad guy, he's going to make sure you suffer. That's the difference between Obama and Biden and Donald Trump and Ronald Reagan. George Bush, GW, or just George Bush and Clinton. What's the difference? They're weak. They will let people be abused because they virtue signal. They want to look like they're doing something rather than actually doing anything effective. Remember when Michelle Obama decided to hashtag Boko Haram, return our girls. Boko Haram, a Muslim terrorist organization that routinely captures women and sells them as slaves. Yeah, they laughed in her face. Those girls never got returned home. But Michelle Obama, she had a whole big tweet. She had a hashtag. And she was hashtagging away with all of her friends saying, free the girls, free the girls. And all the black women, all the liberals and progressives, they're like, yeah, we sent out a tweet. Did nothing. Saved no one. Helped no one. Useless. Utterly, absolutely useless. You don't see that crap now. There's a difference. You get the useless virtue signaling crap from the left. You get something effective from the right. Hey, I got Mrs. Channel. The Mrs. Channel is with me. Hello. And Mrs. Channel, they're relatively new to the channel. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're enjoying the show so far. Says, bet the 8 countries with complaints against Maduro in International Criminal Court for human rights violations and torture are happy. You would think so, but no one's mentioning that. The mainstream media isn't going to tell you that because Orange Man bad. Because they can't get past that. Because if they admit at any point that Donald Trump has done anything in his lifetime that isn't utterly evil, then you might not vote Democrat. Because if you even consider one thing that Donald Trump, MAGA, Republicans have done that isn't evil, then they might be worth voting for. They might have a political ideology that's worth learning about. And that means that Democrats, they will lose. And they know it. They will absolutely lose if it isn't constantly about this emotional manipulation. And that's why we see what's happening. By the way, Mrs. Channel, thank you. Thank you for checking us out. I appreciate you. Dal says Britain has to play politics closer to favor the China economically because the CCP controls the corporations that owns critical industry and infrastructure, like British Steel. They're not self-sufficient. You know what helped them become self-sufficient? Tariffs. Why? Tariffs make all that crap expensive. So someone will go and make another British Steel. Someone in England will build a new steel factory because if you have tariffs, the imports are too expensive and therefore you compete and you make your nation self-sufficient. Tariffs are working wonderfully, but not in the way that the mainstream has told you. The mainstream has tried to convince everyone tariffs, well, that means in 3 months, everything should be done. No, that's not how it works. It takes time. It's a 5-year process at the quickest. It's going to take at least 5 years. But at the end of 5 to 10 years, then you see the result. America is more self-sufficient. And then the prices go down, not beforehand. Okay, so we've been on for just about 3 hours. I wasn't expecting to be on that long. Tomorrow, Sunday, at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I will have my regular show. That will be season 8. But in fact, that means 9 years. We've been doing the Sunday live stream for 9 years in a row. And I enjoy doing that. The reason, and you wonder, why? Well, Mike, if you've been doing it for 9 years, why is it season 8? Because I don't count the first season. First season, 0. I know some people go, well, the first season, the first year that you were doing the live stream, you count that as 1. I count it as 0. I start counting after that. So that's why it's 9. So again, it's just math of it. But this will be the 9th year of doing every week the Sunday live stream starting at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we cover all the issues. As much as I want, this was all about the breaking news of Venezuela, understanding the War Powers Act, understanding the authorization, uniform authorization of military forces to determine if Donald Trump had broken the law or not. Is this a benefit for Venezuela or not? How do Venezuelans feel about this? That the news media doesn't want you to know. They don't want to talk about that. They just want you to think orange man bad, authoritarian, he's so terrible. I think in 3 hours, I think I've clearly identified that's not real. Now, again, you don't have to like Donald Trump. It's unnecessary. Has nothing to do with whether or not he's being a good president. It has nothing to do with whether or not he's exceeded or stayed within the Constitution. It has nothing to do with your feelings. You can think Donald Trump's a horrible person or the greatest person ever. You can feel whatever you want. You're a grown adult. I'm not here to tell you how to feel. That's your life. Feel however you want to feel. I'm talking about what we know. What are the rules? What are the laws? What are the consequences? As far as I can tell, everything looks really good. We're probably not going to have an actual physical war. Why? The Venezuelans are happy. They wanted this. No one in the world was willing to help them. They were willing to virtue signal, but they weren't actually willing to help. They were willing to put out all the hashtags. They're willing. You saw Hakeem Jeffries. Oh, yeah, Maduro was evil and bad. But help the Venezuelans? No, I can't do that. Well, you know what? We'll let them come to America. They can walk 1,000 miles, 2,000 miles across the American border, become a second-class shadow criminal in America. That's the answer that you get from the left, from King Jeffries and the rest. Oh, yeah, they can be our gardeners. Illegally, they can be our gardeners or our dishwashers. They can do that. How about instead of, forcing them to travel 2,000 miles to get into America, to be a criminal, to constantly be hiding in shadows, rather than that, how about we just fix their country? Oh, no, but you can't do that. That's colonizing. That's evil. So it's not evil to let them live in the shadows, not ever achieve anything, and be criminals. That's okay. But helping them fix their home, that's the bad thing? Think about what the left is offering you. Think about what the left is telling you. It is bad to help these people have their country back, to get their freedom back, to be able to have a better country to live in. That is evil because the Democrats didn't think of it, because the Democrats aren't willing to do it. No. Democrats think it's good for those Venezuelans to be illegal aliens in America and be slave labor. That's good, according to Hakeem Jeffries and the Democratic Socialists of America. And if we actually try to help Venezuela and Venezuelans, well, that's just evil. That's bad. How dare you do that? You're a colonizer. You're a colonizer. How dare you improve their country? How dare you improve their government? How dare you help those people to be self-sufficient? How dare you make a profit while making Venezuelans self-sufficient? That's evil according to the left. But slave labor, that's a good thing. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. All right, folks. So, 3 hours. I've appreciated you taking some time out of your day. I wasn't expecting to be able to do this. I just was reacting. This is my live reaction. Tomorrow, we'll be talking about completely different issues that are just as important. One of them ones, the post office has screwed you. Yeah, the post office just screwed you. Taxes. California and Illinois still want to hurt you. They're going to punish you because you voted for Donald Trump. And they're going to hurt everyone. How dare Donald Trump have a good idea? No. We can't help Americans get more money. They have to punish you. We're going to talk about that and why Kathy Hochul decided to do the exact opposite. We got a few other things that we'll talk about tomorrow. And maybe some more about what's happening with Venezuela and the attempt to impeach Donald Trump. We'll talk a little bit about all of that. Chase Oliver, you have my phone number. If you think I've been too harsh to you, Chase, you can give me a call. I'll be happy to have you on the show. And you can go live and tell me exactly why you think I was too harsh if you think I was. I don't think I was. But there you go there. All right. With that said, I want you all to have a great night. You too, Shelly. Thank you for spending some time with me today. I want you all to be safe, stay warm, stay healthy. Screw Zoran Mandami. Helping the homeless does not mean let them sit out in 24-degree weather with snow. That's not helping. But we'll talk more about that and how much money we were able to raise for the Jericho Project. I believe tomorrow I will be making a payment. It should be either tomorrow or the next Sunday. I need to check if I got the final numbers. And we will be making the donation to start off the year right for the homeless, getting them the homeless, veterans, and families in need, I will do more to help them directly than Zoran Mandani. And we'll talk more about that tomorrow, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hopefully I'll see you then. Share this to everyone. Leave me a bunch of comments. Tell me if you agree, disagree, if you like it, you hate it. Let me know. I will appreciate it. Talk to you again soon.